I've only shared this story with those closest to me, but every time I go back to it, fear twists my gut and I instantly get goosebumps and tears welling up in my eyes. Before I tell you guys about it, a little bit of background about me first. At the time, I'm 40 years old, married with 2 children, enjoy walking nature in the mountains, and take photos when the weather permits. I'm not religious, but I try to hold on to Cartesian thinking. This evening of August 22, 2017, all the indicators are green to go and take photos of the Milky Way in the mountains. I'm hoping to get some nice shots with fire trees, or trees at least. At 10 p.m, I throw my gear in my trunk and head up to a village 30 minutes away. Arriving at Bullet, everything's set up, but the weather decides to play a trick on me and the sky is filled with high-altitude clouds suddenly. It's not the first time that this has happened, and after a look at the satellite animations a little further on, the sky seems more cooperative. I take to the road again, heading for Le Creux Devant, a well-known geological circa in the region where I live. When I arrive near the parking lot that leads to the path to get there, I'm greeted by numerous flashing lights. Police, fire department, ambulance, everyone is there, at the top of the mountain, in the middle of the forest. I'm stopped and questioned about my presence, and I explain why I want to go up there. The police explain that the site is not accessible, and ask me to leave. I'm getting tired and decided to go home empty-handed, but that's for another time. But then, a shiver suddenly runs down my spine. I've been driving through the forest for a few minutes when I come to a clearing. I was driving slowly for fear of running over nocturnal animals. And there, in my headlights, there's this, well, he's there. At the side of the road, it's there. My eyes are riveted to this thing. I'll only see him for a few seconds in the end, and the time that it takes to overtake the car, but it feels like an eternity. He's tall, very tall, over 2 meters at least. He's also very skinny, sickly skinny, and his skin is white as a full sledge, completely naked as well. He has a little bit of black hair that's sort of tousled on his head. His arms are crossed over his chest, immense fingers dangling from the tips of his hands, and he's covered in what seems like maybe blood everywhere. He follows me with his eyes staring into mine. I'm overcome by primal fear. My whole body is screaming at me to flee, to get away as fast as I can. It's as if my survival instinct is suddenly begging me to get as far away from here as possible. By reflex, I mash the gas pedal and drive at breakneck speed to reach the edge of the lake and leave this forest that oppresses me. I keep looking in the rearview mirror, unaware of the danger I'm exposing myself to by driving at this speed. The tears of fear are streaming down my face, and they're absolutely uncontrollable. Honestly, I'm terrified to my core, like a 5-year-old whose light has gone out in a cellar. When I finally reach the edge of the lake, I pull over to the side of the road and try to regain my composure. Clinging to reality and the rationality that has always built my life like a lifeline, I feel like I'm suddenly going mad. I'm thinking that maybe somebody has had a car accident and was in distress and I didn't stop to help or something. I hate myself for having reacted so badly if that's the case, for having been overwhelmed by unreasonable fear. So I call the police, still breathing hard. I tell them who I am, that I haven't been drinking or taking drugs, and that they'll probably think that I'm crazy, but no, they're benevolent and listen to me all the way. I finally get home and my fear explodes in my belly, this look never leaving me and piercing me again. I tell him what happened to me and I start crying again. 2 hours later, at 3 a.m, the police, they ring my doorbell. There are 3 of them, and they're obviously taking this very seriously. They ask me for more details about the time and the place. Luckily, I know the place perfectly well and give them the GPS coordinates of what happened. The next day, the Creux Devant, where I was heading, made the headlines in the local papers. apparently 2 people had died there in the middle of the night in a microlight accident. With no news from the police after several days, I contacted them and also learned that a carcass had also been found several kilometers away with no one at the wheel, but that I had done the right thing by not stopping. I'm 47 years old now, and I've been back to that place many times, day and night, because it's a place that I really love. I've always found it hard to believe in the supernatural, even though I'm convinced that many things go beyond our understanding of the world and shatter our certainties. But this one thing, this one event, it always has me questioning, well, everything. I have 4 weird experiences from when I was working on ships. The first one was midway across the Atlantic in 2013. Me and a few other cadets, we were on the bridge wing, outdoor part of the wheelhouse, for our celestial navigation project. We saw a light come up from the east, fly at high speed until it was almost directly above us, and make a 90-degree turn and zip over even faster. It was at the altitude that you would expect to see a plane at, but nothing turns when crossing the ocean, and especially that fast. I don't think that people could even survive a turn that quick. Anyway, the second was an animal sighting. This time I was a cadet on another container ship, and we had just left Dutch Harbor, aka heading for Japan. We were about halfway between the two and the 100s of miles from land. It was choppy and overcast, and the mate and I saw a large school of porpoise and seabirds, which typically would indicate that they were following fish. In the middle of the group, though, we see a huge white fin come up that looks like a whale's paddle fin. It could have been a whale, I admit, but we have never seen anything that big before. The third one, though, was definitely the weirdest. I was out of school and working on a seagoing tugboat in the Gulf of Mexico at the time. I didn't see it, but I came up to stand my watch at 15:45, and the 2 guys up there had weird looks on their faces. One looks to the other and says, "Should we tell him?" I ask, and they proceed to say that they had just watched a beach ball-sized bubble with pulsing lights on the inside fly in front of the boat about 10 feet above water. They said that it was moving against the wind at a constant speed, and the outside of it looked like when there's an oil in a puddle in your driveway. The last one was in the Gulf of Mexico again, and this one was the longest. So me and a few others were sitting in the mess watching TV, and the captain called down on the phone. He asked us if we wanted to see a UFO. We all went up, and 4 of us sat there in the wheelhouse and watched a red light sort of erratically snap from one position to another, a short distance away, for about 2 hours. It would sit in a spot for about 15 to 20 seconds, and then snap to a new position in a straight line and sit there. The best way that I could describe it is that it would be like putting a laser pointer on a wall and jerking it around to a new spot a few inches away. Eventually, though, it just took off at high speed, and, well, that was that. So I worked in the radiology department in a hospital in Cardiff, Wales, UK, for about 3 years as an admin and clerical officer, before getting a promotion working in medicine. During these 3 years, I saw a lot of things, ranging from patients dying in the MRI scanners to patients having an X-ray for inserting a meat thermometer into their urethra. Yeah, that's a real thing. Nights always seemed the craziest too, but one time a patient came in with armed police after an altercation which involved a knife in the middle of the city centre, and just so happened that the person he had the altercation with was having an X-ray too. This caused a second altercation right in front of me. Chairs were thrown, a trash bin or two, and then wheelchair even. So I've seen things, some funny, some stressful, some sad, and many bonkers, but this one night, well, it was something scary. So I would start a night shift at about 1900, then would work till about 8:30 in the next morning. This was the standard night shift for our department. We would usually do 3 nights in a row before doing 4 days off. After the 3rd night, you were ready to sleep for a week, let me tell you, but the strange thing was that this was my first night of the 3, so I wasn't tired at all. It started off normal. I arrived at the department, took over from the day staff, logged into my PC. During this time, we usually would set up our phones or tablets to watch movies or maybe even the latest TV series, as there would be a lot of downtime between patients. Like I said too, the first few hours, nothing that interesting, just your average run-of-the-mill night in radiology. Then it came to my break, and now before I tell you more, I should probably explain the layout of the hospital. This hospital is the largest in Wales. It's a teaching hospital and it's pretty old. Now, the best way to get from A to B in this hospital is through what we call the tunnels or the catacombs. These consist of very dimly lit corridors, old abandoned rooms, tunnels, and other creepy sort of decrepit areas. The morgue is also found in these corridors, so it's not a nice place to be during the day, let alone the middle of the night, but it's the quickest way to get to places, if you're staff, that is. There's always been rumors too, and mumblings of strange things happening in these tunnels. Some people say that they saw ghosts in old-fashioned porter uniforms taking wheelchairs to pick up patients. Others say that they have seen shadows following them from the corner of their eyes. But one person has claimed that they were attacked by a person wearing an old nurse's uniform from the 70s. This place is creepy too, even at the best of times. But for me, it just never really fazed me, I guess. I mean, I've been down there hundreds of times before. The worst experience up to this point was having a sluice pipe drip human waste on my head. That in itself was a horror show, but tonight would be something altogether different. And honestly, maybe not even of this physical world. So, like I said before, it was a very quiet night. I had been watching the latest series of One Piece because I'm a bit of a geek. During my downtime, a radiographer or radiology technician for my American friends out there came to take over and cover for me for my break. I decided to go to the 5th floor where the sanctuary, multi-faith chapel, was located. On a night shift, it was one of the most peaceful places in the hospital, but to get there, I had to walk through those tunnels to reach the nearest elevator. I set off on my journey, which would usually take about 15 minutes, scanned my card on the main entrance to the tunnels, and then proceeded to walk through. 2 minutes in, I started to feel like someone was walking behind me, though. It being a busy hospital, and basically the tunnels acted like the highway, I didn't think anything of it. Suddenly, I heard panting, like someone was trying to catch their breath after going for an intense run. I turned around to check, but saw nothing. A bit strange, but thought that it was nothing. Maybe just one of the pipes above my head creaking or a generator pumping. So I carried on walking, but I kept feeling like someone or something was watching me and was walking behind me. Out of sheer confusion and a fear that I missed my turn towards the elevators and found myself in a large section of the tunnels that I've never been in before, littered with old stretchers, beds, hospital furniture and equipment. Some of this stuff was over 50 years old, maybe older, just left to decay in a dark, smelly, decrepit and dusty corridor. This was starting to really creep me out, because in all of this confusion, I realized suddenly that I must be lost. It almost felt like I had fallen into the back rooms. Everything sort of looked the same. I could feel a tightening in my chest and could feel the start of a panic attack. I remember clutching my chest and running down a corridor trying to find a signpost or something to tell me where I was. The sense that something was watching me, though, got stronger. Suddenly, I felt something hit my arm in force, almost like someone using a baseball bat. I remember falling to the ground, pulled myself across the floor towards the cold, dusty wall and looked around frantically, trying to find an explanation to what the heck just hit me. Then something caught my eye. It was almost like a black mist with glowing red eyes. It was about 20 meters away from me, just hovering in the middle of the corridor. Was this the thing that had been stalking me the entire time? I got back up and I sprinted. I ran down what felt like 100 different corridors until finally I found a housekeeper or a janitor. He asked me what was wrong because I looked pale, but I couldn't get any words out. He then grabbed me by the arms with a firm grip and said, "Did you see it too?" And that was the last time that I ever stepped foot in those tunnels. To this day, I hear rumors of strange things there. I'm not sure what I saw that night, obviously. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was stressed, maybe it was something though. Why else would the janitor ask me to if I had seen it? What else is down there? Well, I can tell you that one thing is for sure. I won't be going to find out. My experience starts in New Mexico, west of Clayton on 422. I was drilling for a small mom-and-pop company with a hydraulic rig, which only took 2 people to operate, which was my younger brother and I. It was hot that summer and the rig would overheat. It was always during the day, so I told the boss man that we would drill at night and that way there would be no issues. My little brother had the company truck and I had my personal vehicle, which was a 2003 Tahoe. I also had my girlfriend with me at the time, so we agreed to meet at the job site after dark. We live like an hour away in Texas. Anyway, you would pull off 422 just after the road tees to another small town that I don't know the name of, and you would have to open and close at least 5 gates to get to this spot, some steel and some barbed wire even. When I got there, I fired up the rig and generator, turned on the lights to check equipment. Everything seemed good, so I shut it back down to wait for my brother. I folded the back seat down and I was going to try and sleep for a little bit when my brother was headed out towards us, so me and the girlfriend jumped in the back of the Tahoe to get some shut-eye. And that was when I noticed just how pitch black it was in this pasture. There was no moon or no stars, nothing, just darkness about this time, and I see what looks like headlights at a good distance, far enough that it looked just like one headlight instead of 2 separate headlights, which seemed like they were headed our direction, but not from the direction that we came from a different direction, to the east. I was puzzled by this, and we watched this light come down that appeared to be county roads, still thinking that it was headlights, but it still never got close enough that it split into 2 separate lights. So it was still pretty far away, but anyhow, we're sitting there watching it, head our direction, and all of a sudden it does a spiral move and disappeared, like as if you were to stand outside with your finger, draw a spiral in the air, but imagine it was like 5 miles away. Seeing this, I instantly knew that it was not a car anymore. I look over at her and ask, "Did you see that?" She did and hugs me tightly as we talked about it, trying to wrap our heads around what we just saw. She points out this red glow that's coming toward us though, toward my truck slowly from the east, and honestly, I was in a state of disbelief, sitting there quietly, trying to come up with any logical explanation for what this glowing red mist could be. I thought, it must be a brake light. No, the brake pedal is clear of anything that could press it, and the rig and the generator were off. Looking around for anything as a solution, I look over and ask, "Are you seeing this? I'm not tripping or nothing, right?" She said, "No, this is happening. Let's get out of here." I said, "No, let's see what it wants." About that time, this sort of mist surrounded the back half of my Tahoe. Looking out of the window seemed like looking through a red filter, but not just red, almost like a ultraviolet red, a filter but without the black light. She then said, "Let's go now," and I said wait, trying to figure out what was happening. And that's when I heard a knock on the rear passenger quarter panel. It scared the absolute heck out of both of us. She screamed, which made me panic, so I turned around to start my truck up. I couldn't find the key for a split second, but when I did, I put it in and turned the switch on, but nothing happened. Like the battery was dead. No light, no radio. Then, a split second later, the engine would turn over, but still no lights. There was now a second thud on the rear quarter. The truck turned on, We looked around and everything was normal again. The headlights came on, but we left out of there right then and there, and obviously I didn't drill that well. The boss man did, and we ended up meeting my brother at one of the many gates to get on the property. I tried to tell him what had happened, and he said that something had hit his truck too, but brushed it off as a stick or something. I told my boss about it. He thought that I was at drugs, and to this day still believes this, and honestly, I still don't know what the heck it was. I don't think it wanted to harm us because the whole thing just kind of happened. It didn't seem sort of intended, I suppose. Like I just so happened to be in its path, or it wanted to see what the bright lights were way out in the middle of nowhere. Honestly though, that's a wild guess and I really don't know. But I am wondering if anyone has any similar stories to this, or any information on what this could have been. I have wanted to go back and check it out at some point, but also I really don't want to get shot by a rancher, and honestly, I don't want to experience that again, either. Since my daughter, 18 months, was able to wave, babble, and generally interact with people, she's been interacting with someone or something hiding in our closet. It all started with waving. I made the joke that there's a ghost in there, but at the time I didn't actually believe it. Our dogs like to sleep in the closet, so I just figured that she was waving to her. There was only one problem, though, with that explanation. Anytime she waved, my dog was nowhere near the closet. Then she started babbling. She'd have full-on babble conversations with the closet. We brushed it off as her just being goofy, but sometimes she would hold up toys to show the closet and then babble about it like she was doing a show and tell. Now she's starting to use full sentences, and just this morning she looked over at the closet and said, "Hi, I see you," and waved. This is the first coherent sentence that she has said towards the closet, and it's definitely a little bit unnerving. Again, my dog wasn't in there, and she's laying at the foot of the bed. The closet is a small walk-in style closet. There's some built-in shelving up top, some plastic shelving we added, and the door is off the hinges and leaning against the built-in shelving because it fell off and we need to fix it. There isn't a single thing in there that looks like a human or anything. I've always been a bit sensitive to these things, but more so when I was a kid. I like to think that if there was something in that closet that I would feel it, but now I'm doubting myself. For context, we live in a trailer built in the 80s, not even an old house. As far as I know, the only deaths that have happened in this house were a couple of pets the previous owner had, and when my daughter talks to whatever is in there, she always looks up like a tall person is standing there, rather than a cat or a dog. So I have known about the black-eyed children urban legend for some time, but I may have had an actual encounter with one years ago. This happened in Portland, Oregon, around David Douglas High School. I looked up black-eyed children, and there have actually been a few encounters and reports of them in Portland, back in the 90s, I believe. This encounter, though, happened to me during my high school years, so around 2009 to 2011. I can't remember the exact year, but I want to say I was about 14 at the time, and it was late, around 12 or 1 in the morning. Maybe a bit later, but I believe it was a weekend. Anyway, my brother and I were up watching South Park, and we heard a knocking on our garage window. Then I heard a knocking at our window. We had one of those huge windows that covered the front of the house. The curtains were up, but I peeked out of the side and saw a woman. She looked very pale, with black hair, and her eyes were really dark. Now, she very well could have been a tweaker, I know, but it's the next part that creeps me out the most. So after knocking on the window, she then knocks on the door and asks us to let her in. Me being the person that I am, I'm like, heck no, but My brother, who was like 10 at the time, walks over to the door and says that he's going to let her in. I have to forcibly hold him down until the person leaves. My mum and her boyfriend wake up from hearing me holding down my brother. They ask if somebody knocked on the door, and I tell them what just happened. One thing that I had heard is with black-eyed children encounters that sometimes they'll force people to do things with no recollection of them doing it. Why I bring this up is that I asked my brother if he remembers the lady, the knocking or trying to let her in, and he always tells me that he doesn't. To this day, the experience really creeps me out since I ever first heard of the black-eyed children phenomena, because everyone who has claimed to have had an experience with them have said exactly what I experienced. So I know that this is most likely going to sound made up, and honestly that's why I haven't posted it or shared it anywhere yet, but I just cannot seem to get it off my mind, and I'm wondering if anybody has any information or maybe even a similar experience to compare it with. So, I was out in Long Island, New York around the beginning of the new year 2022 when I went out for a late night drive with two friends of mine. We were about 40 minutes away from my house when we started feeling just a really heavy presence surrounding us as we went down a specific road. My friend asked if we could turn around and go down the other turn instead, but doing that led us to a dead end, so we had to go back. As we drove down the road that felt menacing, we passed a cemetery at one stage which had two what appeared to be humans standing in robes facing a statue of the Blessed Mother and waving what looked like maybe a wand towards it. As we drove by, we noticed that it seemed odd, so we drove into the gate and parked a few feet away from them to watch them. They honestly appeared to be statues at first, but then, without even moving, they started facing us and they started waving their wands over us too. The weirdest thing, though, was that their faces looked largely expressionless, but also had features that really I can only describe as a mix between a witch and maybe a pig. My friend that was driving, he instantly took off upon seeing their faces, and we started to head home, all of us feeling like something malicious was there. As we got further into the drive, we then realized that we were being told to go back in the same direction by the GPS, as the GPS had rerouted us back to the same coordinates that they were at. Needless to say, we did not follow the GPS or go back there, but we all returned home that night, and we also felt sick all night, each of us, which was really weird. Anyway, some time had passed, and I had told another friend of mine about this experience, and he said that he wanted to go there because he had never experienced anything like it. We went, and he started feeling sick as we pulled up again, so he kept driving and we left. But later on that night, he said that he was home with only his girlfriend, and they both heard what seemed to be something running up to the door and violently slamming on it, which also knocked some of the stuff on their shelves down, but when they went looking through the house, there was nobody there. I cannot find any information on anything like this, and I am very tempted to go back, but I just can't get myself to actually do it just yet, out of fear and probably just a lack of understanding. I've been busy dealing with the wake of a family tragedy, but now that things are returning to the new normal, I figured that this was a good time to share this. So first, I'll describe the nightmare. It's a very short dream. It's a very clear memory, just because of how scary it was, I guess, but I was about 4 or 5 years old, perhaps 6 at most, and my twin brother and I had a bunk bed in a room at the farthest end of the house that we grew up in. The nightmare, it had me in my bed looking out the window to see a red sky, the kind that it gets in the early dawn hours before sunrise, but light still colors the sky. The next and the only other thing that I can remember in this nightmare is that a man with crazy blue-colored eyes and a bald head appears at the window and stares right at me. The nightmare ends there, but I remember just how much I screamed and screamed about it. I don't know where my brother was at the time when I woke up screaming, and the only thing that I can remember from when I woke up was having my mum come and get me and calm me down as she took me to her bedroom down the hall. I only remember that so well because I wonder where my dad was at the time. Anyway, fast forward to this May, and my father is in hospital in the country that he lives in, Colombia, and my twin brother and older sister are staying in a hotel about 5 minutes walk away from the hospital that he's staying in the ICU at. One night, after a long day of being there for Dad and for the extended family, my siblings and I return to the hotel and sit together to have a couple of beers and try to relax after all of that. We start discussing things, trying to unwind, but somehow the discussion of nightmares and dreams come up, and I bring up the story that I mentioned earlier. Without missing a beat, my sister straight up explains that had really happened, that some guy really did look through my window and that she remembers the whole thing. My sister, she's 5 years older than my brother and I, so this would make her 9 to 10 years old, had her bedroom adjacent to the bedroom my brother and I shared. Her room faced our front lawn and street, while our room faced the neighbor's house and their driveway, with a very low fence between the two houses. While she didn't get into too much detail about the days before the nightmares or the event, she said that she had been followed by a bald man in a truck as she rode her bike home with some friends a couple of times before. The day immediately before this nightmare was no different, but the man this time actually drove right past the house. At the time, she was a latchkey kid since my brother and I had to go to a special school about 45 minutes away from our hometown. It was for a speech impediment issue that many twins have, and my mum had to pick us up rather than be home for my sister after school. But she was never home alone for more than maybe max an hour. Anyway, that afternoon and evening was pretty normal as she remembers it. My dad came home from his job. He worked as a part-time cop and worked in a local hardware store, and we all had dinner, did homework, played, and did usual family things before bed. That night, though, at around 12 to 1 in the morning, this bald-headed dude had parked down the street at a small industrial park and walked up to our house and apparently tried to get in through my sister's window, which woke her up, and she screamed when she saw the man nearly opening the window as it wasn't locked. My dad stormed in and tried to shove the guy out or tried to hit him with the nightstick that he had. My sister doesn't remember exactly, but this caused the guy to run off, but only for a short time, as apparently he came back a moment later to try and get into the window in my room. He tried opening the window, but it was locked because my mum didn't want my brother and I to open it, because our bed was right up against it. My sister said that I screamed as loud as I could, and my mum went in to get my brother and I, while my dad tried to go after this guy by running out the front door to chase him. Unfortunately, it was to no avail in the end, as the guy hauled butt right back through our backyard. The way our backyard was situated, it had it backed up right against a small rail yard that is part of the aforementioned small industrial park down the street from us. Between our small neighborhood and the rail yard was a good amount of very dense trees that always made the backyards very, very dark. So my dad, he didn't want to get attacked by him there, so instead he went back inside to our house, called the police, then our elderly neighbor to make sure that they were okay, while our mum took care of us kids. And that was all my sister could remember from that night herself, as this was a very long time ago. Neither of us could recall anything else after that either, and the story just sort of stops right there for both of us. My father sadly passed away in the hospital, so we aren't able to ask him. And given that all of us haven't had the chance to ask our mum yet, maybe we'll ask her soon, but we aren't sure exactly what happened after that. For now, though, it has become obvious that that alleged nightmare that I had, well, it wasn't a nightmare after all. Instead, it was probably an attempted home invasion and a kidnapping. I work full-time as a deputy sheriff in a very rural part of the northern US, right outside of a Native American reservation. Although I do several things for the sheriff's office, I mainly work inside the sheriff's building itself and the jail. In my time in law enforcement, I've seen many things I can't understand, but here are some of the most memorable. Inside the jail lies a medium security housing unit. The inmates stay within their cells from 2200 to 0500. During that time, several inmates are allowed out to assist with cleaning and laundry duties. I've always had a bit of a weird feeling inside of this cell block, but every once in a while my fellow officers, and even some inmates, see a man that we call the Watcher. Late at night, as officers walk the cell block, we will occasionally see a man behind us wearing white inmate worker clothes. Sometimes it's when you turn your head, to check behind you, and sometimes it's right in front of you even. You never seem to know when you'll see him, and a double take results in him always being gone. He appears to every officer the same, and to some senior guys, it's a bit of a rite of passage when for younger officers to ask about the long-haired old guy out of his cell at night. This is also compounded by the fact that odd cries for help are heard occasionally, only for officers to run out of the office checking cell to cell for someone in distress, only to find no one awake. I personally have heard my last name called to me while sitting in this housing unit. I heard it plain as day right next to me, in fact, only for no one to be awake and all the inmates asleep and accounted for. This particular housing unit has a long history of suicides, overdoses, and violent fights for the better majority of the last 3 decades. My first paranormal encounter here started even without my prior knowledge, and other officers only disclosed the information after I inquired. The kitchen is another hotbed of activity too, with the 2 spirits appearing in the same manner and performing the same activities to each that see them. The first, it's a larger man, maybe 6 foot, 250 pounds. Nearly every officer who has seen him describes him in the same context. He can be seen as soon as you unlock the kitchen and look up from your keys. He's dressed in white kitchen worker clothes, standing at the sink washing his hands, as if he is about to start his shift. My first encounters happened right after I was off FTO and started night shift. For nearly 2 weeks straight, I would see him and I would always do a double take, only to see nothing in his place. For weeks I thought I was honestly going crazy, not asking anyone about him. It was only after one day that my supervisor comes running into the office screaming about seeing something in the kitchen, only for his horror to be compounded when I gave an exact description of the individual and the task that he was performing. My supervisor, who is a devout Mormon and a firm critic of anything supernatural, was scared so badly that he refused to enter the kitchen for a very long period of time after that. The second spirit of the kitchen, though, is the exact opposite of the man in white. He is faceless, and only a faint orange glow is seen, the same shade as an inmate jumpsuit perhaps. He's seen when you go to lock the kitchen door. The squeak of an inmate's shoe is heard and an orange glow rushes you as if he's trying to escape the kitchen before the door is closed. The kitchen also has a history of inmate death, with records from the 90s reporting an inmate breaking in and using the kitchen knives to, end his own life. But no place in the entire jail has more horror and terror than the maximum security wing. Activity is non-stop, from random door slamming to lights burning on and off. A personal favorite of mine is when you're in there, inmates can be seen at night walking the top tiers on cameras and in person, only for you to rush in about to confront an inmate for being out past bunk up, only for every door to be secure. There's random screams that are heard coming from areas where no inmates are housed. Footsteps happen so regularly that many officers don't even react anymore. But my all-time favorite is the time when an officer witnessed a female inmate, through one-way glass, exit her cell in the middle of the night without him unlocking it. The inmate proceeded to wrap a noose around her neck, climb the railing and jump off the top tier. Several officers witnessed this happen too. Radio calls to dispatch were made, emergency tones rang out, only for the officers to open the cell block door, make entry, and see nothing. The odd thing about this incident, though, was that this cell block only housed male inmates, but several years prior was a dedicated female housing block. One place in the jail that has been terrible in particular over the last several months or years is Cell 19. It has housed dozens of inmates, but most either have some mental episode that results in them being institutionalized or moved out within a few days. Examples include completely normal inmates going to bed, only for them to wake up in the morning screaming, rushing out and giving evangelical sermons warding off evil. Normal inmates getting housed only to have a horror show of health issues in the day following. Heart attacks, strokes, and seizures for inmates normally of good or moderate health. In the most recent case, an inmate who was a prior co-worker of mine at another job attacked several officers inside the cell following cries for help. It took 6 officers, a taser, pepper spray, and a restraining chair to subdue the guy. The reason why officers responded? He was choking out his cellmate completely without cause. Following this, the inmate was placed in an observation area but was seen taking off his socks and shoving them into his mouth, only for him to be saved from passing out when an officer took them out. The inmate in question the next day was seen looking directly into the camera and breaking his hand seemingly without any pain. That man, mind you, is in his 70s too. Many things can be explained to simply being because of the high-stress environment and the nature of jail, right? But many things experienced by officers with no prior knowledge of the happenings, and the fact that they happen so often is why I felt the need to share this. If you think that any of this is false, then simply consider it entertainment, I suppose, but I can assure you that I've lived through it, and it is not pretty. So I am not one of those people that gets sleep paralysis frequently. It hasn't happened since this first time, and as far as I know, the same goes for the others involved. The gist is that 10-ish years ago, me and my best friend and my dad had very similar first sleep paralysis episodes on the same night. Granted, as far as sleep paralysis goes, the experiences were pretty textbook. We each woke up, couldn't move, felt dread and fear, and could see a dark figure barely in a field of vision. In my room, it was squatting in front of my door. My friend says that it was beside his bed, and for my dad, he actually says that it was sitting on his chest, strangling him. I know that these episodes by themselves are pretty textbook, but what I cannot explain is the timing of it, with seemingly no common causal factor between us. At that time, my dad and I were in the same house, but we didn't know about each other's experiences until the next day. As for my friend, he wasn't staying with us that night, but he did live right down the street from us. So, am I wrong for thinking the timing of this is too peculiar? It was the first and only time any of us had had sleep paralysis on the same night, even in the same area. I feel like the odds of that happening must be very small, and if there was in fact nothing peculiar about that night, it must just be a coincidence with stupidly astronomical odds. Nearly a decade later, everyone's stories haven't changed too. That friend and I, we've talked about it a few times since then, and the one time that I've asked my dad about it, he remembered it vividly too. So, to conclude, I still have no explanation for this, and it makes me wonder if there really is something more to sleep paralysis. Do any of you know of any similar cases that were suspiciously coincidental like this? Or maybe there's a potential natural explanation that I've missed. Was this mere coincidence, or just highly strange? So last night, I awoke to the unsettling noise of loud banging and my dog's frantic barking. Living alone with my girlfriend, we had grown accustomed to our neighbors' domestic disputes, and I have called the police often on them. I stumbled to the bathroom as the walls there are pretty thin and separated our duplex from theirs. As I approached the bathroom door, the entire house was dark and a tall shadow was in my bathtub. I wasn't wearing my glasses and I am incredibly nearsighted, so I struggled to discern at first whether the shadow was merely the shower curtain or what it was. But then the shadow spoke. I don't know what he said, but the gut-wrenching panic I felt is still fresh. I screamed and fled back to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My girlfriend, now awake and terrified, joined me as I dialed the police. They instructed me to lock the door, but my bedroom doesn't have one. With the banging growing louder and more aggressive, I braced myself against the door, praying that help would arrive in time. To my relief, the police arrived swiftly in only 5 minutes. When I finally emerged from the bedroom, I found that they had dragged him naked from the bathtub because he had been trying to shower, apparently. They were questioning him on my couch while he was handcuffed, obviously. He was incredibly drunk and had wandered into the wrong house. It was the one night that we forgot to lock our doors. My family used to celebrate bonfire night when I lived in the UK. If you don't know what that is, well, you probably should have listened in history class. Anyway, our tradition was to buy paper lanterns, write notes to everyone that we lost, put them inside, light them up and watch them burn out into the sky. It's pretty beautiful now that I think about it. I was at my grandma's when this happened and we were all in the back garden from memory. After letting go, we cheered and cried, but we were happy. At one point, my memories are a bit hazy, but the things that stood out were so vivid in my head. I was on my mum's shoulders, and everyone was talking about my great aunt, who'd passed several years before. She was the rock to the family, and my first ever memory of my entire life is with her, in fact. Now, the next door neighbor's house was dark, and nobody was inside. For context, there was a small alleyway in between the two houses that led to a door to the main road. I couldn't see much as it was nighttime, but I looked at the neighbor's house and around until I saw this little girl with very long white hair, and dressed in all white too. It really felt like she was glowing in the dark almost. She was walking down the alleyway and I freaked out instantly and started crying and screaming at my mum that there was a girl walking down the alleyway. They checked, but there was no one there. Mum said that I was just too tired and needed to go to get some sleep. Weird from her, since she's a big ghost believer, and so I thought that she would believe me, but anyway, now the next part is extra weird. So I actually got the chance to speak to the neighbors one time after this. I don't know how long after, but I was still pretty young. I used to be a bit of a weird kid that was sociable to anyone. Thank you, ADHD, but the man was a really nice guy with a really cute dog. His dog had jumped over the fence to see me in my grandma's garden while I was playing, and this led to a conversation with the neighbor. I asked outright if they had a kid, and he told me no and that they were waiting for the dog to pass to try and have one. They were a young couple, and I was honestly pretty shook by this. I told him what I saw that night. He took a while to respond, but when he did, he told me to sit down next to him, and he looked me in the eyes and said, "I believe you. I've already seen her before. Don't worry, you're not crazy." Something like that. And out of nowhere, he drops a bombshell on me saying that, in any case, our brains are like cylinders on a satellite in space being controlled by something, and whatever we perceive as life is just simulation. Obviously, these are not his exact words, but it was something close to this. He continued, "That's why I know you're not lying, and that's why ghosts exist." He looked visibly freaked out, told me that I should leave, and I never ever saw them again after that, which is kind of crazy. It was a very strange experience, both the girl that I saw and the conversation with this guy. I don't know if he actually believed what he was saying or if he was just saying it to try and make me feel better, but whatever the case, it was strange. I went to a wedding of my friend Courtney about 2 days ago, and I still cannot shake my mind over what happened. For context, I grew up in a very religious household and went to a church every Sunday, and Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. The situation started at the reception. Courtney was super excited to see me, and was definitely the only person who felt that way, judging from all the stares from the people at my old church. I sat down at my table and started playing something on my phone when some guy sat next to me. He said that the seating chart said that he was supposed to sit at my table, and introduced himself as the groom's friend, Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist and seemed genuinely interested in me. When the dance started, they started playing Brown Eyed Girl and he offered to dance with me. We danced together for most of the night, until he left to go to the bathroom, and a little later I did too. When I came out, I saw that my purse wasn't on the table, which was weird because I swore that I left it on there. I was tired though and thought that I had just left it in my car, so I went into the parking lot and into my car to look for it, and found it on the center console. I still brought it inside, but at that point it was pretty late in the night, so I didn't think too much of it. I danced some more and noticed Anthony was gone. I asked the groom, who said that he had gone home because he wasn't feeling too good. And pretty soon I started feeling pretty sick too myself, so I said bye to Courtney and went to my car. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked behind me and saw something weird. It looked like something had ducked down from the trunk. I took my keys out and looked back there, and that was when I saw him. Anthony was crouched down in the trunk of my car. I started screaming and ran out with him chasing after me. I went inside and told Courtney, who immediately told her husband, who walked me back to my car where Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Courtney's husband said that he didn't see his car anywhere, so he probably left. I left, and I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about it. He could have easily gone home with me and killed me if I hadn't have looked back. Courtney said that she feels terrible that she invited him and that she had no idea that he would do that. I haven't stepped out of my house since because I'm worried that if I do, that he'll be waiting for me like he was before. The last couple of days have been a bit crazy for me, but unfortunately my address was on my ID, and as I learn now, Anthony took photos of it. Anthony and the groom aren't exactly friends, but they know each other well enough for him to be invited. After the whole fiasco, the groom tried to text Anthony about it, but got no response. Anthony showed up at my job and was lurking around the parking lot before he ran off when he saw security. He left me a note on my windshield that just says, "I'm watching." Security at my job has been notified about him, so hopefully I'm safe there. I was told by other people that went to the wedding that he was introducing himself as my boyfriend, and that he was planning on proposing. I'm currently trying to file a restraining order against him and feel horrified. He lives in my city and knows where I live, so I'm staying at my aunt's house as I speak, and if anything else happens, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So last night was the first night in, well, a long time that I'd been alone overnight, as my boyfriend went to visit his mother for the weekend. I was talking on the phone when suddenly my call seemed to have been hijacked, and a raspy female whisper with a kind of static sound began to speak in words that I didn't understand, and I quickly got the feeling that I needed to end the call, which I did almost immediately. A short time later, I hear a soft tapping, almost like someone lightly packing cigarettes, right outside of my door, and I have no idea what it was. It went on sort of rhythmically for a couple of minutes, then stopped. Obviously, I was pretty spooked by this, but went to sleep a while later without further incident. Then, shortly after I woke up this morning, I heard a male voice, but it didn't sound like a real person. It sounded like an old record. It was very high staticky, and I couldn't understand some things it said, but it did keep repeating like hey and hi right outside of my door. Neither of these occurrences are particularly worrying, but altogether it gives me the creeps. I'm wondering too if anybody else has experienced anything that you can't see but can hear like this, and that instant feeling that whatever it is, you shouldn't acknowledge it, and that it isn't good. My mum's father died when she was around 18, and ever since I can remember, she frequently visited his grave at the cemetery, decorating it, visiting, and so on. When I was too little to be left alone and my dad wasn't home, she would always take me with her too. Ever since I can remember, I have hated that cemetery. Being there always made me anxious, scared, gave me bad vibes, whatever you want to call it. I would always refuse to get out of the car at first until, inevitably, being alone sitting in the car got too scary, so I got out. The grave isn't far from where you'd park your car on the pathway thing, so I could get out and join my mum easily enough. Because of this, there's a tree nearby between the graves and the road. Getting out of the car always made the feeling worse. Even if I was with my mother, I couldn't wait to get home. This went on for years too, until a few years ago, when I was around 16, I believe, my mum told me a story that literally made my jaw drop. Now, I hadn't gotten out of the car during that visit, and when she got back in, she said, "You know, you've never liked being here, and ever since the first time me and your dad brought you as a baby, it's always been like that." And then proceeded to tell me a story that made the whole thing make a lot more sense. Apparently, when I was a little baby, old enough to sit up on my own and such, I think, my mum and dad took me to the cemetery to visit my grandpa's grave. I was sitting in the grass, happy and all. They were keeping an eye on me, but weren't like all eyes on me sort of thing. I was looking up in the aforementioned tree between the graves and the road, and all of a sudden I just started screaming, like I was being actively stabbed or something. I was just completely terrified. My parents scooped me up and checked me over. There's no ants or bugs on me or on the ground where I was, but I kept crying until they left, eyeing the tree. I don't remember what I saw in the tree, obviously, or I would describe it, but whatever it was, it scared me so bad that it must have scarred me or something. After she finished, it made much more sense to me why I never liked that place and was also just so anxious to be there. I just got back from a mini vacation with my wife in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. The cabin was in a populated area, but hidden from the road on top of a hill. My first impression was that it was a little bit eerie, but I brushed it off and assumed that it was just because of the horror movies that I'd recently watched. The energy inside felt a little bit heavy, but nothing that I couldn't handle. I'm very sensitive when it comes to paranormal energies, and I've lived and worked in haunted places all of my life. This cabin was different though. The dark energy was overwhelming, and I didn't sleep until daylight for the 3 nights that we were there. In the end, I had to sit in the living room where I saw shadows and the cord on the wall-mounted phone swing and suddenly start and stop again. There were banging noises and also the sounds of someone walking through the hallways. Also, I could absolutely not take being in the bedroom. It was filled with mirrors. My wife would wake up every morning at around 3 a.m. and be unable to fall back to sleep. The 3rd night, I couldn't take it anymore. The dark feelings almost had me in tears and an anxiety attack. So we left the next evening, taking a loss on our last night booked at the cabin. I just hope that whatever it is, that it didn't follow me home. I bought my house in 2013 and was aware that before we moved in, an elderly lady had lived there for around 4 years before passing away. We never learned if the woman passed away in the house, but I was not worried about it at the time. This is just for some context, as I'm not actually sure to this day that anyone actually died in the house. Anyway, in June of 2013, one night before we moved the furniture to the new house, my wife and our 2 toddlers were painting and it was getting pretty late. My wife decided that she would take the kids and head to my parents' house for the night. While I was painting alone in the master bedroom, I heard the toilet seat slam down violently in the guest bathroom on the other side of the wall where I was painting. I mustered my courage up and walked around the corner down the hallway, stepped into the bathroom and turned the light on, only to find that the toilet seat was up. The second thing that happened was in December of 2013. I remember this because it was around Christmas time and we had just finished loading up the car to head out to Florida from Texas. I had just gotten into the car that was parked in the garage facing the road. My wife was inside, checking that everything in the house was set for our 2-week trip. Shortly after I had sat down and started the car, my wife sat down next to me and shut the door. And almost immediately after my wife sat down, I swear that I saw a figure of a person walk behind the car in my rearview mirror. I looked at my wife and asked if she saw that, and with a cold look of fear on her face, she muttered, "Yeah." I ended up searching the house for 15 minutes because I was convinced that somebody must have been in there, but in the end I found nothing. The last occurrence that happened was actually in 2016. It was late and I was in the office playing Minecraft on my PC. I fell asleep while playing in my chair with my shirt off and woke up to the touch of a hand on my chest from behind me. While still sort of half asleep, I started to open my eyes and felt nails digging into my skin and sort of yelped. I jumped up and went into the living room and flipped the light on and had 3 claw marks on the left side of my chest. Additionally, my wife had just been given 2 Japanese geisha dolls that were set on the mantle over our fireplace, and I got a really eerie feeling upon looking at them as I walked into the living room and threw them away. So this may have been something else, I'm not too sure. The dolls were bought at an antique shop and were a gift, but still, there was something off about them, and so, in the end, I got rid of them. This happened when I was 16. I was staying with my best friend at an old plantation house in Inverness, Mississippi. It had a very old shack out back on the property. We had been on the Ouija board earlier, and afterwards I set a video camera on the staircase, aiming at the Ouija board. After watching the recording, we noticed orbs coming out and back into the Ouija board. I didn't even know about orbs at the time, but I just thought that it was pretty cool. I didn't realize that we'd actually captured something very interesting. Really, I wish that I still had that tape too. Anyway, later that night at around 3 a.m., my friend's nephew, who was about 3 at that time, came out of his room walking in a sort of daze. We asked him what he was doing, and he didn't answer. So we asked again, but said his name. He sort of looks at us and says, "Eyes are not Nicholas, my name is Samuel. I live out back in the slave house." This was not Nicholas's voice too. I mean, he had never heard anyone speak in that sort of slang before. He then turned around and went back to his room and went to sleep. I asked my friend if Nicholas had ever spoken like that, and he just slowly shook his head. We were both pretty freaked out, but not scared. Nothing ever felt really malevolent or anything. I'm 42 now and starting to realize that my life is on a downward spiral to death. It honestly scares me, and I just want to be with my family and friends again after this life. When I start to doubt myself about it just being nothingness, after I reminded myself about what I experienced that night, I always feel a little bit better. It hasn't been religion or anything like that that makes me believe that there's something after this. Instead, it was that experience that night. I know what I experienced, and I know that someone entered back into our reality for just a couple of minutes then. So they had to be, well, somewhere else. And that is what gives me some comfort when I think about death. So back in 1995, I was 12 at the time, I finally decided to play the Ouija board with my dad. I should preface that my dad used to do a lot of seances and other occult things like tarot. As a result, he had some pretty unsettling encounters that he told me about, which I might share another time. But for now, we go through with this game and we ask the usual questions. And I distinctly remember how unusual the movements of the glass piece felt. It didn't feel like controlled, natural movements. In any case, later that night we started watching TV, and I kept seeing these little green human-shaped figures pop up in the corner of my eye, and when I tried to look directly at them, as usual, nothing was there. This goes on for about 5 minutes, and my dad starts laughing and says, "You see them too, huh?" I thought that he was trying to scare me, and so instead of telling him what exactly I saw, I said, "See what?" He laughs again and says, "Those little green guys." This comment was honestly one of the scariest things that I have ever experienced to this day, and afterwards, I have never touched a Ouija board again. That last piece of this story involves going outside with him so he could smoke, and our black inside-outside cat hissed at us and the house and jumped off the van and ran off down the neighborhood and didn't come back until late the following afternoon. He also knew that something was seriously wrong, obviously. People say that Ouija is fake, but depending on who is using it, their openness and location, I think, it opens areas that shouldn't be opened. It's been almost 30 years and that moment still sticks with me, and I never ever considered that game ever again. So me and my sister were sitting in the garden at night after we came home from a walk, and I saw a small flash out of the corner of my eye, but I ignored it at first because I wasn't sure if my mind was just playing tricks on me or not. But then she goes, "Hey, did you just see that flash?" I said yes, and we kept talking for a few more minutes, and while I was facing her, I saw another flash out of the corner of my eye. She saw that too, and then we saw a huge star appear. There were no other stars around that night. Then the star disappears and reappears multiple times. After a bunch of times of this, it disappears and then reappears a couple of inches in the sky away. It did this a few times until it had moved halfway across the entire sky, maybe in about 5 seconds. We started freaking out, and I take her phone and try to record it, but the videos weren't that good. I do have them though, and so I have some proof of it. My sister runs inside the house, and she comes outside with my mum and my other sister, and my mum isn't that impressed because she can't see it moving. It just looks like a regular star at first. She eventually goes back inside, and then immediately after we see the shooting light come back. But this time, there were many of them. But they seemed almost high-tech, and they formed formations that didn't seem to make any sense. We call our mother back outside, and this time she can definitely see them. We stand and watch them for at least 10 minutes, and my mother can clearly see them, so she starts praying and my sister is freaking out. My other sister didn't come out again. She didn't believe us because the first time she came out she didn't see anything. My mother and sister start freaking out and they went inside. I wanted to stay and watch though, but I was sort of scared to be alone outside after seeing that. My sister starts texting her friends, but they don't believe her, so she asks me if we can go back outside so she can try and get a good picture of it. So we go outside and we spend like another 10 minutes recording, but all the videos were pretty bad because it was nighttime. This time we stand and watch in silence, though. We even saw a few things that looked like small planes, maybe, which would disappear after a few seconds. I watched a small light slowly glide across the sky, and then it would disappear and reappear somewhere else. Similar to the first UFOs that we saw, but this one was far more away. It was really weird to watch because I think I was literally witnessing some sort of teleportation. It's been 4 hours and I'm still trying to process all this. Also, when they disappeared, they'd sort of shrink and blink or shine similarly to in cartoons when characters would throw something into space. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, then do comment below because I'm not sure of the word for it, but that's what it was like. Then we see multiple lights move at the same speed, and they were making a large square formation. Then I make a joke and said, what if it's one big mothership? And that makes my sister freak out and she runs inside. Now my family is really scared and my sister even asked me to stay in her room until our dad came home from work. And look, I don't even know if I've even explained the story properly, but this is the weirdest situation of my life and there's no way that it can be mistaken for anything naturally occurring. That much is clear. A couple of weeks ago too, now that I remembered this, my mum did call my name and shout, "What is that? Look out your window." But by the time that I got into the window, it was gone. I went to ask her what she saw, and she said that it was small and black and flying across the sky at super high speeds. I wasn't really sure what she was talking about, until, obviously, I saw it for myself today. But she saw it during the day. We saw it at night, and she claims that the flying lights that we saw today look like what she saw, but she saw a black thing while we saw lights. This week has been absolutely hectic for me. My 3 kids, they have the flu. Oldest was first, then my younger 2 caught it. After a visit to the clinic, I was heading to the CVS down the street from our house for their prescriptions. I decided last minute to drop my kids off at home with their dad so they could rest and I could go inside the store to pick up some medicine. I consider our neighborhood to be pretty safe. I've taken walks after dark and I've never felt afraid. Most of our neighbors are older folks who have lived there over a decade anyway. And when I pulled up to the CVS, I parked on the side parallel to our street. It's darker on that side, but the entrance is right around the corner and well lit. There was a man standing outside. He walked in front of my car and I could hear him talking, but my music was kind of loud. I figured that he was on a phone or something like that. No real red flags yet. My husband, he called me as the man walked back towards the corner adjacent to the entrance. I got out of my car, still on the phone, telling my husband, yeah, kiddos have the flu, I'm picking up medicine at the CVS, etc. In a very pleasant voice, though, the man then says to me, hey, I got a question for you. You know where the main street is? I, assuming that he's asking for directions or the location of something, tell him that I do. I'm still holding my phone to my ear. It's in a bright pink case, so I'm sure that he could see it. Now, this man is standing directly in front of me. There is a pillar and a trash can behind him. Around the corner is a propane cage and a red box against the store's wall. Getting past him would put me in arm's reach. Next, he asks for a ride there, though, to a homeless shelter. It's very cold outside, and he apparently doesn't want to freeze. I empathized with him, but said that I really couldn't. I offered to buy him gloves and or a blanket, and to ask if an employee in the store could assist finding him a ride. And man, this guy's face instantly changed to just pure rage. And then, right back to pleasant. Well, you know what happens to homeless people stuck outside, right? You're going to help me. It's right down the street. I'm standing there at that point, unsure what to do. My husband is on the phone asking what's going on. I gently tell the man that I don't feel comfortable doing that, and then I have the flu. I don't really, and my husband is on the phone with me. I don't care about the flu. Now, he's getting more angry and not moving away from my route into the store. I didn't want to turn my back on him to go back to my car, which was several feet away in the dark at this point. While this guy is glaring at me, I decided to quickly walk past him. I had my mask from my clinic in my jacket pocket, so I pulled that out and held it in front of me while I moved towards the trash can. He looked disgusted, but kept telling me that I need to give him a ride. It's right down the street, he insisted. But I know where that street is, and it's not as close as he's making it out to be. He tried to guilt me, and his words felt threatening, but he didn't really actually threaten me verbally, I guess. Once I was around the corner, I rushed into the store straight into the pharmacy. My husband then said that he's calling the police. He heard the way the man was talking to me and said to stay in the store. I'll admit that my knees were shaking. I'm not usually the type to be so afraid when confronted like this. When I got to the pharmacy, I interrupted the pharmacist and a customer apologizing, then told them what happened. The pharmacist sent the store manager out, tall guy with a long beard. Looked like he doesn't take much from people. The police, they'd already arrived. The man was told to leave, which he did momentarily. But soon he came back into the store, yelling obscenities and something about me. Now, the store manager told this guy to get out, that he was trespassing on the property. The cop came back to talk to me and told me that she has arrested him many times apparently. He's loud and likes to yell at people, but he allegedly isn't violent. The pharmacist had me hiding behind the screen where they give vaccines and left the half door to the pharmacy cracked open in case I needed to get out of there. The cop had also told me this guy's first and last name, as did the store manager. I'm wondering too, is that really normal? Anyway, the prescriptions are finally filled in and I leave the store. The police park next to my car to keep an eye on me. Oh, and the man refused a ride from the cop to the shelter in the end. Later on, I looked him up though. His name is unique, so he was easy to find online. And surprise, surprise, he has a long record spanning 3 states and several counties. Tons of public intoxication charges, DWI, urinating in public. But then, there were the assault and battery charges, and indecent exposure. I also looked up the homeless shelter, and yeah, as I thought, there isn't one where he wanted me to take him, but that area is definitely super sketchy. Earlier today, I went to the corner store across from the CVS and told my friend, the overnight shift employee, what happened. She kicks him out of the store and calls the police every time that she sees him because he yells and threatens customers apparently. But he always takes off before the police arrive. Now, I know that I could have handled that better. I was blindsided by his instant shift from pleasant to filled with rage, I guess. A big thank you to the pharmacy team, though, who kept me safe, and the store manager for confronting the creep as well. I mean, they really didn't have to do all that, but they did. I'm thankful, too, that my husband recognized that I was in an unsafe situation over the phone, because if the police hadn't arrived, I really don't know what would have happened. This man is still out there somewhere in my area, and I really, really hope that I do not run into him somewhere out there. I, a 16-year-old female, have recently changed schools and everything seemed to be fine. I've even made a few new friends and met with a few past friends that I already knew. Everything was going pretty great really, until, of course, something had to go wrong. For some context, I have a good friend there, but we're not that close to be like sharing things that are personal and all that. We just discuss things about school, studies, and things we both like. And here's where the story begins. In 2023, September, at the start of the school year, I had found a little spot for myself to sit at. It was outside and quiet, which I like because I'm extremely introverted. I've been at that place multiple times, usually sitting with my notebook, writing stuff and drawing. After a good long while of hanging out at this place, I started to notice that there was this student, always standing quite far away, sitting on his phone. At first, I didn't think too much of it, since he's not the only one who's hanging out at that spot, and there were other people sitting or walking around anyway. However, I've been getting this awful gut feeling that I'm being stared at in the middle of drawing or writing. Of course, again, I still didn't think much of it, since I kept thinking it was just me being paranoid. Plus, I mean, if it's a guy who just maybe wants to talk to me or something, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, I started sitting inside just to test that theory out, and where I was sitting there was a window, ground level from where you could see the whole place from below, but because it was ground level, no one would be interested to look at the windows. First 2 days, everything was fine, but on the third day, he stopped coming to that place, which definitely perked up my interest and kind of made my stomach feel a bit upset. Well, I went back to sit in my usual place, and he came back there. I had to pretend like I didn't notice him. It'd be safer if I just didn't acknowledge him. And in the end, I just stopped coming to that place entirely. And yes, while there's not much to that story, there's more. So, on a little break day that our teachers decided to give us, we hung outside all day, and you were allowed to stay inside if you perhaps had the need for medical attention or something of that sort. I went to a very isolated place, different from the one that I've been coming to before. It was basically a parking lot near the school. I sat, and as usual, I was drawing and writing. In fact, I was so focused on my notebook that I just didn't even notice my surroundings. And to my shock, I heard a familiar voice not far away, literally over the car where I was sitting on the staircase. I heard that same voice of this creepy guy. I felt as if my inspiration ran dry at that point. My heart sort of fell to my stomach, and I began to feel a bit nauseous. He was on a phone call or something, but before he was inside the school, going to the bathroom, and mind you, the parking lot is quite far away, and no one can really see where you're sitting unless they get closer, where I've never seen him on a phone call or never saw him using his phone there. Usually he was sitting at my favorite spot, which now I despise. But I told the teachers that I felt a bit sick, which was true, and they let me inside till we had to leave from the school. I wanted to talk to my new friend about it, who knows him and frequently talks to him apparently, but I feel like I'll say something inappropriate and he might actually distance himself from me. He's a great friend and I would hate to lose him, but I also want to do something to stop this matter from escalating because, I don't know, I just feel like I'm being stalked. I mean, maybe I'm going crazy, but the other day when I was walking home, I could have sworn that there were eyes on me. If I go and talk to the stalker himself, I feel like he'll sort of feel like he's finally been noticed or whatever, and maybe have a sense of victory that could encourage him to keep stalking me. I really don't know what to do other than to try to keep ignoring him, and I really don't want to give him any attention or notice him in the slightest, but the fear that he's going to do something even more creepy is making me feel scared when I attend school. I mean, I don't want this guy to, follow me home or something. I have a sneaking suspicion, too, that he's now following me outside of school because I could have swore that I saw him the other day. Again, maybe my mind is just playing tricks on me, but what do you guys think? Is there something more to this? And if so, what should I do? I've had a few paranormal experiences throughout my life, but this one popped up into my brain the other day and I've been thinking about it a lot and can't really explain what happened, so I thought that I would share. About 2 years ago in the dead of winter, my power went out. This was a big problem for me because I have a pet leopard gecko who requires heating elements to survive. it started getting very cold in my apartment very quickly, to the point where I became worried about my pet's safety, and did the only thing that I could think to do, which was take my gecko to my car and crank the heater up. Normally, we get a few power outages every winter in my area, and they last maybe an hour or two. This time was different, because the power did not come back on for 6 hours. After about an hour of sitting in my driveway, I got extremely bored and started driving around my neighborhood, which had some more rural areas that butted up against national forest. One of these areas is an absolutely beautiful overlook where you can see miles of the forest and also a few streetlights, so I'd be able to see if the power came back on. So I drove there and parked to enjoy the view. I'd had the heat running for a while at this point, and the car had gotten a bit hot, so I rolled down the window to let in some cool air and almost immediately started hearing something kind of far off at first. Kind of a weird sort of sad-sounding howl, I guess, mixed with a sort of squawk. I assumed that this was an animal, but rolled up the window almost all of the way just in case. Over the next 20 minutes, the sound got progressively closer and closer to the car until it sounded like it was circling me. I can still hear this sound in my mind, clear as day, even though this happened several years ago. And I know what animals we had locally and what they sounded like. And this, whatever it was, didn't sound like any of them. I got nervous and decided to leave, and I go and get some food and gas in my neighboring town that still had power. About another hour passes and there's still no power. Having convinced myself that the sound was just an animal, and it had probably long since moved on, I went back to the overlook to enjoy my meal. About another hour goes by without anything happening, no noise, no nothing, until eventually I see movement among the big rocks in front of me. It's starting to get dark, so I can't really make it out perfectly, but at one point, it looked like the head of a disfigured animal peered out at me over a rock and then disappeared. I see this several more times, but if it was an animal, there was something severely wrong with it, be it an injury or a birth defect, that would probably affect its quality of life. And I wanted to be able to let animal control know so they could find it, help it, or at least put it out of its misery if necessary, since it was clearly staying in that exact area. After a while, it starts making that noise again, the same one as before, but now it's also added this horrible gurgling, and it almost sounds human. At this point, it's gotten completely dark, and I can't see much of anything, but I can still hear it circling the car. Eventually, I hear what sounds like something messing around near the back tire, and I panic and peel out of the parking lot. And it was then that I looked behind me and see what is now very clearly a person in the taillights. They attempted to chase the car for a few feet, but they quickly gave up. Now, is it possible that this was just a person under the influence or suffering from a mental health issue? Yeah, it definitely is. But that just seems pretty unlikely, since it was probably below 30 degrees outside, and far enough out of everyone's way that I doubt anyone would be hanging out there, let alone hanging out there for hours and wearing what appeared to be an animal skin on their head. If it wasn't a person, based on the location and how the thing looked, well, I can only guess that it was probably a skinwalker. This experience honestly still terrifies me to this day when I think about it. I believe that I may even have a recording of the sound that I'll try to find. If I can find it, I'll be sure to share it, but due to the power outage and wanting to save battery and all that, I didn't film or record most of the experience just to conserve my already dying phone. I live with my partner and roommate, both of which are really into paranormal YouTube channels and shows. This is something that they bond over. And my roommate even has some tools that he has used, even in our own house that is over a century old. I, on the other hand, have an appreciation for it, but I'm not as into it as they are. I'm also more skeptical than they are, I suppose. Not to say that I don't believe in it, because I absolutely do, but I try to look at things from an objective point of view. With that being said, a few months ago, I am pretty sure I encountered a ghost cat. My partner and I have 3 cats. I work from home and have been dubbed the crazy cat lady, so the cats and I are all very attuned to one another. It began with me thinking that I see one of our cats out of the corner of my eye, but when I look, there's nothing there. I then began to see the cat figure walk around out of the corner of my eye. This is when I was introduced to the second ghost cat. One of them looks to be black or dark, while the other looks white. I've never seen both cats at the same time. We have a white cat with grey markings, a brown tabby, and a black and white tuxedo. Sometimes the ghost cats would do things my cats would normally do, so I chalked it up to being a muscle memory thing. Kind of like I'm used to them being there, so I feel like they're there. Until a few weeks ago when I was laying in bed, when I thought that I saw our white with grey spots cat dart across our room. Something that she would absolutely do, but when I sat up to talk to her, I didn't see her anywhere. I laid back down to see a white cat dart across the room the other way, up into the bedroom window, and I heard scratching or tapping at the window, something that my cat would not do. I slowly sat up thinking that it had to be my cat, only to see nothing. I tried telling myself that it's the muscle memory thing, but I couldn't get myself to believe it that time. I feel like it was a white ghost cat. Because of the amount of minor encounters, I decided to bring it up to my partner and roommate. My partner says that he thinks he's seen them too, but he's been too afraid to believe it because he feels like it's not a cat, but a bad entity trying to disguise itself as something innocent. My roommate thinks that I'm just used to the cats and I'm just overthinking it. This was super disheartening because I don't feel like I'm being overdramatic at all. I really believe that I've felt them and seen them. Now, I'm sharing this because I had a second encounter of one of them just a little bit ago. I think a black cat ghost touching me. I will sit at my desk to work and oftentimes my cats will come and rub up on my legs, then I'll reach down to pet them. A few weeks ago when this happened, I reached down to feel, but there was no cat. I thought that it was the chair or my pant leg just tricking me, but it just happened again. And this time it felt sort of odd. Now I am fully convinced that there is a black ghost cat and a white ghost cat that live in my house. My cats have never acted strangely towards them, which is another reason that I don't believe that they're bad entities disguised. I also think that it could be one ghost cat, but I absolutely have seen both a black and white one, but never together, which, I don't know, maybe it is just one thing. Anyway, do you have any thoughts on this? Do you think that it is some sort of entity? Are ghost cats even a thing? Am I being dramatic? Is any of this valid? What do you think? I work night shifts, so staying up through the night is pretty normal on my days off. About 2ish in the morning, I always let my dogs out, and I let one run and keep the other on a leash because she loves to run after literally nothing. But my leash dog starts to snarl at the tree line that is about 30 yards out from me, and I notice something very large moving awkwardly into the tree line, moving into the woods. It was walking with a heavy rock side to side, moving very slowly. I own horses which are fenced in, and this was happening outside of their fenced-in area, so I know that it wasn't any of them. This thing, though, was looking as big to bigger than my horses, so I was really confused. We do have deer that like to nest or settle overnight inside the fence with their younglings because the horses ward off some predators like coyotes and such. I walked to my house to grab the flashlight, and of course, I shined the light, but there was nothing. I never heard a single crack or snap or nothing while I saw it, and afterwards it was gone, which was weird because it was so huge and I would have expected to hear something. Anyway, my son said this afternoon that he saw something at 12:30 last night and said one of the horses was out, but then after checking all the horses were in, said that he must have seen the biggest deer that he's ever seen. Like a deer as big as a horse or even bigger. Now, he lives in a different house but further away on the property, about 3 times the distance I am. I scare deer away every night before I let the dogs out so I don't have to chase them in the middle of the night through the woods. But this, whatever it was no deer. My wife believes it to be the spirit of one of our horses or whatever that we had to put down last week. In the past, we both have had our share of weird instances at that wood line, but this for me, it definitely took the cake. Scary thing is that we're planning to build our future home right by that area. In 2016, I was a junior in high school. I didn't live far from school, but it was still about an hour's walk. I was in pretty good shape back then, I guess you could say, and didn't mind the walk when my older sibling couldn't pick me up due to work. My parents were both at work too, and I hated asking friends for rides because it just felt sort of bummy. Anyway, I started to walk home on a nice September day in Florida. About 5 minutes down the road, I got the feeling like someone was looking at me, and I turned around. And standing there, about 50 feet away, was a clown. This was back when the killer clown sightings were at an all-time high. It was late September, so I just assumed it was an early Halloween prank and shrugged it off. I turned back around and kept going. Another 5 minutes went by, and I couldn't shake the feeling a clown was following me. Again, I turned around, and he was about 30 to 40 feet away now. I was, needless to say, pretty nervous at this point. I turned back around when I heard a snap, and next to me, just inside the brush between subdivisions, was another clown. It was clear that this wasn't a prank anymore. Sensing that I was in danger, I started sprinting when the first one from behind me ran too, saying, "Grab him." The second clown chased after me too. I could clearly hear their footsteps behind me. I scanned the nearby houses and thankfully saw a police cruiser in a driveway. I got there and banged in the door until someone answered. The cop, seeing me shaken up, looked around and saw one of the two holding a decently sized hunting knife and told them to freeze. They both bolted, and after that I just ran, and I never heard anything about their capture or anything. To this day, clowns still unsettle me, and I cannot see a picture of any of them, whether it be a party clown or Pennywise or whatever, without thinking back to the time that I possibly almost died. I have had people stalk and follow me before, and because of that, and my true crime addiction, I've become supremely paranoid and a solid curtain twitcher. I, a 31-year-old female, reside in an upstairs room that was my first room to myself as a child. I had to leave a bad situation and therefore ended up back at my childhood home. For reference, when our house was built, we were told that the field to our left, with horses and a barn at the time, would one day soon be a development. It was 2000 when we were told that, and it wasn't until 2022 that roads started being formed and foundations laid. I'd already had someone follow me home before when I was young, but I was in a different bedroom next door. My parents put in a free library that's right below my window, and nighttime security lights that were very bright and turn on if you're within like 20 feet of the side of my house my room is on. I'll admit too that having an open field next to me so long made me accustomed to not closing the curtains when I changed, because there was never anyone to really watch or anything. But obviously now there is. For the past 2 weeks, the burglar lights next to the free library have been going off late at night as well. Because my one side of the curtain is open so I can use my vape, that was the only reason that I noticed at all. I didn't think too much of it at first. I mean, we lock all the doors and the windows every night, and I'm on the second floor anyway. I also always looked out to see if it was a car, someone walking their dog, or maybe a deer, only to see nothing. To add to that as well, they put in a ton of streetlights around this area, so visibility is pretty great. But it just kept happening for whatever reason. So, last night I did my usual and I saw the lights come on out of my peripherals. Giving full view out the window, I was going to bed, it was around 3 in the morning, turning the TV off, closing the window and curtains, turning the light out. Then, I ducked down, peering through the curtains to the sidewalk below. And I honestly thought that I was going to pass out when, after a few minutes, maybe 5, someone comes out from the side of my house, all silhouette, dressed completely in black. They kept their back to me until the light turned off, but I swear that I could still see them standing there, looking up like they could see me. I called the police, but while I was on the phone with the operator, I saw him run off. There really wasn't much that they could do, except say that they'd have a car drive around and look. My parents are asleep, and I know that I have to tell them tomorrow, but this honestly scares me a lot. If it hadn't have been happening for weeks and was a solo incident, I would probably be fine about it. But the fact that the light has been going off without me seeing activity, and what happened tonight, makes me think that this person has been watching me, and probably casing my house. Eventually I did tell my parents, and at first they brushed me off, claiming that I'd had a couple of drinks and it was late, so I probably just saw someone checking out the library. I then had another conversation about it with just my dad, who said that there had been reports the last couple of weeks of car break-ins, and since my car is parked on my side of the street, right outside of my window, maybe they were trying to break into it. I pointed out that if he was trying to get into my car, why was he pressed up against the house where he wasn't visible from my window? And why did he at no point go towards my car as well? I think that I freaked him out enough that we're going to potentially get a camera for that area. Given all of the development happening around us, I think it's smart, even without this incident. Anyway, here's hoping that this guy doesn't have plans to break into our home at some point. But if he does, then what do you guys think that I should do? For context, I live in the woods of southern West Virginia, deep in the Appalachian wilderness. I'm an hour and a half away from any large city, and another 30 minutes from the nearest Walmart. Needless to say, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Yesterday I came home to a strange feeling that I was being watched. I thought that it might have been coyotes, so being the homesteader that I am, I sat outside with my gun and LGB, livestock guardian dog, and waited for them to come for my chickens. My dog was alerting me to the presence of something, but when he would get close to where it was, it just seemed to disappear. He would stick his nose in the air and catch wind of where it was and run to it, never finding anything. Fast forward to tonight, and I have the same feeling. I take my light outside and shine it at the edge of the woods, and that was when I notice eyes staring at me. This is odd too, considering that my 150-pound LGB is going nuts, barking and looking for this thing, and it's sitting still, not moving. I walk right up to it, and I see a bobcat looking me dead in the eyes from 10 feet away. It looked away from me and walked around a tree, completely not paying attention to me. Now, for those who live in the city, bobcats are extremely rare to see, let alone come within 10 feet of shining a light directly on it. I pulled my pistol out to shoot it, and it didn't go off. I racked it back and tried again, and still nothing. It felt like something was holding my trigger back almost. I ran inside to get my shotgun at this point, and I followed it into the woods about a quarter mile before I finally lost it. Keep in mind, it never once ran from me, but instead walked slowly, as if it was trying to lead me somewhere. When I came back out with the shotgun and followed it into the woods, as soon as I crossed the wood line, fog rolled in as if someone had a fog machine and was aiming it right at me. I mean, I couldn't see 5 feet in front of me. About the time that I turn around to come home, I see through the trees faintly my fiancé standing on the porch, looking back and forth from me and a spot far away behind my house in the woods. I came back down, and she was freaking out. She said that she heard me screaming, like screaming murder for her to help me. She said that I was screaming her name and helped me from well over another quarter mile from where I actually was. She came outside to help me when she saw my light in the opposite direction of where she was still hearing the screaming coming from. During this whole thing, I never heard screaming once though, and I obviously never screamed myself. However, I had the constant feeling of being followed and watched that entire time, but I could never find out what was doing it. The night is young though, and quite honestly, I'm sort of expecting things to get a bit weirder tonight. If anything happens, then I'll be sure to post an update, but do wish me luck. I've been staging residential property homes in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 3 years now. I visit just about every neighborhood and every price range, from like $700 studios, insane I know, to $8 million homes. I usually never know the history of the property or the current sellers, but sometimes I do get insight from real estate agents that the family is growing and needs more room, the daughter is selling her pasted parents' home, a divorce, etc. I have, only on a few occasions, felt some not so welcoming energy in homes, I guess you could say. Maybe I walk a little quicker out of a room, or maybe I think that I saw someone walk past me through a doorway when there was nobody there, but nothing really threatening or anything. That is, until today. So I'm sitting in this really nice empty home, overlooking the ocean in San Francisco, just leaning against a wall in a room off the living room. The movers are outside loading the furniture into the garage to prep for our stage in 3 days. As I sit there in this quiet, empty home, up against a wall with a bathroom on my right and a closet to my left, just looking at my phone, I hear the most guttural, deep and high-pitched growl or scream come directly from behind me. Now, I'm up against a wall, so there is nothing but the bathroom and the closet behind me. I paused and sat there for a minute, and then got up to look out the windows thinking that it must be a dog outside or something, but there was nothing. I immediately felt very uneasy and suddenly frightened. I leave the house and wait with the movers, closed up, and I just left. I have never heard anything like this or felt so unwelcome in an empty home. I'm 17 now, but this happened from when I was roughly 5 to 8. Because this happened so long ago, I'm sure that there are a lot of things that I've forgotten over time or unintentionally blocked out. But around the time that I started kindergarten, we'd moved to a complex where I got a room of my own for the first time. I remember being scared to have a room all to myself, so I would always make sure my closet door was firmly closed, because I was pretty scared of monsters in my closet. I think this might have stemmed from my mum watching a lot of horror content around me, or maybe just a general childish fear, I guess. I do remember it being shortly after we had moved in, though, that I woke up when it was dark out, and I could tell by my window that was to the right of my bed. My closet door opened, and this boy hovered very low to the ground still, maybe an inch off, given that he seemed about my height or size, but didn't make a sound as he walked out of the closet and walked in a straight path from my closet to the window, but he stopped midway at the foot of my bed and just seemed to stare at me. His face was like melted glass, similar to the longer-faced ghost kid from Caroline. Sorry if you don't know that, but that's the only example that I can think of. But he wore a sailor suit, very similar to the results that you get for searching 1950s boys' sailor suit. I remember wanting to scream, but for some reason I couldn't. I hid under my blankets for a long time, and I don't remember what happened after that, but I assume that eventually I must have fallen asleep. Now, it might have been a few days, or maybe even a week, but I saw him again shortly after this. It was roughly the exact same encounter, so it doesn't stand out in my brain, but over the course of a few months, I had the courage to look back at him. I was very scared, but he would never do anything, and I think that I knew that. I mean, he never attempted to climb on my bed or anything, or get closer to me. He only ever stopped and just sort of stared at me, and that never seemed to change. After I started looking at him, I learned that after he left the foot of my bed, he would go to the wall on my left and form a hole in my wall that he would then go through. I remember there were a few times that I would get up in the morning and try to see the portal or whatever it was, but of course it was never there. There was a long time of build-up too, but eventually I just wasn't scared anymore, and I remember the feeling of not being afraid when I looked back at him. After I wasn't scared anymore, I was able to get out of my bed right after he would leave and try to go through the portal, but it would close before I could get to the wall. I remember one specific night, though, where he just didn't show up, and I got confused because by that time it had become a routine to see him every night. I got up and looked out my window to see him feeding the deer on the property. Deer are pretty common in this area. He didn't look up at me or anything, but I remember just sort of staring at him. After we moved away from the complex, I never experienced anything close to this or ever had him appear in a dream or anything. Other small details I want to add as well is that he only seemed to exist in the complex. He never appeared in my school or daycare or anywhere else. My mum told me a few years ago that neighbors in the complex would tell her that I would play games by myself, but seemingly pretend that I was playing with another person. But I myself have no memory of that, so I don't know how reliable that actually is. From what I remember, no other kid in the complex experienced anything similar to this, including my two sisters who shared a room across from mine. I would tell people about the boy that I would see, but they all reacted a bit weird. It's also taken me a long time to come to the conclusion that this was probably paranormal, so I guess I just wanted to share it, and I want to know if anyone has had any similar memories that they carry with them. Like I said, my memories probably changed a bit over time, so take everything that I said with a bit of a grain of salt, but what I do remember very clearly is that there was this boy and he would come into my room every night. So, to give you a little bit of background information on this story, I would like to start with the fact that I'm European. I've shared another story a couple of months back about something that happened to me in Tuscany, Italy. As for me and my friends in this story, well, we're from Spain, and when this happened, end of September 2023, we were fairly new to the US. I moved here a while back for law school, and so did my friends. We'd been living here for a few months and decided to explore the nature of this beautiful continent, as we all live in New York City. So, long story short, we decided to go on a road trip to Canada, drive around Lake Ontario, and then drive back to New York City through upstate New York. I'm a male and my friends were 3 females. Their names are Lisa, Anna, and Charlotte. And everything went super smooth until the last night. So, for our last night, we had rented an off-grid cabin in a remote area in the woods in upstate New York. To give some locals an idea, we were like half an hour drive from Harrisburg, I think. Me and Lisa had decided to spend one night in this cabin because it was one with nature. The cabin was super old, made from logwood, and there was no running water or electricity. Both me and Lisa had experience with survival in the wild in Europe. I, for myself, had been a Boy Scout my whole life and even was a scout leader for a while. Our other 2 friends were, as much as I love them, purebred city girls. They had pretty much zero experience with camping or to just be in place where there's no service for the phone or whatever, as was the case in this cabin. We had been driving all day to get there, and when we reached the beginning of the forest, it was already past 10 p.m. and was really dark that night. While driving to this place, we lost internet connection with the GPS, and so I had to drive to the cabin on intuition paired with a good old-fashioned map, hoping for the best while trying to drive safe on these muddy trails. It was also rainy the whole day as well. On the way there, Anna and Charlotte were in the back of the car, and the moment that they lost phone service, they got pretty uneasy for the rest of the ride. All of a sudden, though, in the pitch-black darkness of the forest, we all saw a campfire, but there were no houses around or people. Just a campfire. A well-organized one, since the fire was not spreading and it was not as big as a bonfire or anything. It kind of startled all of us, as this was a little bit weird since there was no one around and we were really deep in the forest already. Plus, it was getting pretty late at this point. When this happened, we also reached the end of the trail, and we figured that we'd taken the wrong trail at a crossroads before or something. So I turned around, and we were on our way again. Half an hour later, and a couple of wrong trails later as well, we finally had arrived at our destination, as we could finally see the first glimpse of this godforsaken cabin in the middle of nowhere. To give you a bit of an idea of just how old it was as well, the potty was made out of wood and was outside of the cabin. When we arrived, it was still raining, and both Anna and Lisa were definitely not in the mood for getting out of the car, and getting in the cabin with 0 lights was freaking them out too. So me and Lisa left the lights of the car on and went inside the cabin, while also using our phone flashlights to check the cabin out and see if we could find any old flashlights, which we did in the end, and to see if we could turn on the fireplace, which we didn't because all the wood was still wet from the rain, and it seemed as if nobody had prepared dry wood anywhere as well. So with a couple of old flashlights and a small improvised fire, I managed to make in the stove, and we all 4 got into the cabin, and I started to make some pasta for us. Meanwhile, the girls were preparing the beds and closing the windows since it was already cold in this part of the state. The cabin had a small ladder which led to an elevated room or space with a bed where all 3 of the girls could fit in, and I would sleep downstairs in a bunk bed that seemed older than the First World War. While making pasta, Anna, one of the city girls, came up to me and, knowing that both Lisa and Charlotte did not like to hear anything scary at night, told me that she had seen an old cemetery in the middle of the forest on the way to our cabin, and that she had seen a figure walking around there. I first laughed it off as nothing, as I mentioned in my previous story, I do not consider myself a big believer of scary stuff. Being from Spain, we take promises very seriously. To swear on God is very serious for us, and she swore that she was not lying. I told her that I believed her, but that there was really no need to panic, as I would lock all the doors when we would go to sleep at night. We had some pasta and managed to make a couple of s'mores, which are lovely by the way, and drank a couple of beers, or at least I did. They all just had one. I can assure you that I'm not a drunk after a couple of beers, and that I would never start to hallucinate or anything too. I'm just saying this in case anyone thinks that I saw stuff because of the beer or whatever. But they all three went to sleep pretty early after finishing the s'mores and their beer, and I, considering that I really love the outdoors, and that I don't really mind a little bit of rain, decided to take my last beer and a flashlight outside to the front porch, also very old and made of wood, and sat myself down with my beer while enjoying the sound of the rain and the lovely sight of not seeing a single light in the distance. I could greatly appreciate this coming from New York City, and I just scanned the area around with my flashlight. There was really not much to see, I guess, but there were a lot of trees and a small creek a little bit further away. All I could hear was the wind, the rain, and the running water down in the creek. That was, until I suddenly heard what I would describe as a weird sort of roar. The first thing that came to my mind was a bear, but I had researched pretty well before our trip, and I knew bears were not common at all in this part of the state. I also know what a bear roar would sound like, and it just didn't resemble that. Except for the fact that it was a deep roar, I guess, if you get what I mean. But startled, but not really scared, I guess, I continued to scan the rest of the forest for as far as I could see from the porch. And it was then when my eye caught the glimpse of a figure, well hidden deep into the tree line. I would describe the figure as tall. As a reference, I'm 6'4", and I thought this thing was at least a foot or two higher than me. It was well hidden because it had brown fur. That's what I think it was at least, or the skin in any case. It blended in well with the trees in autumn. It was definitely aware of our presence, as I saw two eyes glimpsing into my flashlight. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I swear that it was not a bear. Whatever it was bipedal and had rather long arms, I would say. We looked at each other for what seemed like an eternity, but it was probably more like 5 seconds before it just suddenly vanished behind a tree, and I heard another roar. It was then, too, that I felt all of the hair on my body stand up, and I was definitely very much scared. I went inside as quick as I could, and locked all the doors and closed all the curtains. I quickly went to bed and tried to wave it off as just my exhaustion of driving all day, playing tricks on me, but I promise you that whatever this was, it was real. After an hour or so, I had finally calmed down and I went to sleep. The rest of the night was pretty uneventful, really, and the next morning when I went to relieve myself, after having drank beer the night before, the weather had cleared up a bit and it was pretty sunny, and as far as I could see, the forest was calm and beautiful again. No sight of any animals or anything abnormal. We had a nice breakfast that morning and left for our way back to the city that never sleeps. And so ends also my story of that night. I never talked about what I saw that night because I know all three girls did not like to hear scary stories. And I figured that after all these months that this was the best place to share it. If anyone has any idea of what it could have been, then feel free to enlighten me, especially if it's backed up with rational reasoning. Something tells me, though, based on those long arms, that whatever it was not common to the area. This happened about 8 years ago now, almost to the day in fact. So, I was living in one city and working in another city about 20 minutes away. Since then, the areas between have been hugely developed, but at that time, everything between these cities was just undeveloped back roads with nothing around. No buildings, no sidewalks, no lights, just rough old roads until you get into the other city. To get to work on time, I had to leave my house at 3:30 in the morning, and one morning I jolted awake at 3:20, full of adrenaline as I realized that I only had 10 minutes to get myself ready and set my dog to be alone while I was at work. Needless to say, the circumstances had me highly alert, rushing and focused. Also, I was driving a lot faster that day, but I drove down this road every day as I went to work. I usually take that time to wake up, but this time I was wide awake. All I could think about was what would happen if I ended up being late for work. I was really anxious when suddenly my headlights shone up on something in the distance ahead of me. Now, what I saw was a naked, skinless man crossing the road on foot. When I say skinless, imagine those diagrams in your life science classes, everything beneath the skin revealed and intact, except in this case with a sort of shiny, wet appearance, bright pinks and reds all over, like literally a living, skinless person. No clothes, no shoes, and notably appearing oddly content. He seemed strangely at ease considering that he was crossing the road into nothingness, in front of a speeding car in the dark at 3:45 in the morning. There was no walking space suitable for humans out there for like miles as well. And the area that he was walking into was pitch black, nothing there but weeds and rocks. The direction that he was coming from, the same. No light, nowhere to roam, nothing. Now, like I said, I was sober and super awake at this point, so I have no doubt in my mind that I wasn't hallucinating or tripping or anything. But I have no idea what it was that I saw that day. It was 1998. I was 8 years old and visiting my dad's childhood home. The town where he grew up was so small that you could drive through it within 10 minutes. I still remember the smell of steak from the mum and pop owned restaurant, the sweet cookies from the bakery, and even the cigarette smoke from the hair salon that my grandma used to run out of her basement from 15 years earlier. The house, it had to have been built in the early 1900s. The floors creaked and there were vines all over the front of the house that my dad wanted to get rid of, but my grandma liked the way that they looked. It gave her privacy, she said. My brother slept in my dad's old room, which was primarily blue. I remember the Chicago sports team posters on the wall, edges torn and frayed from time and the occasional water damage. Out of the two remaining rooms, I chose my grandmother's linen room and my parents took the spare room downstairs. I remember the room being sort of frilly. White frilly curtains matched the white lace comforter on the bed, her sewing machine in the far right corner, in front of the window where she would watch my dad play in the backyard. My dad playfully whispered, "That's the haunted room, you know." My dad was and still is a bit of a jokester. I remember scrunching my nose at him and put my suitcase on the floor in front of the bed. Little did I know, though, that he wasn't kidding. My biggest worry was that I would wake up in a puddle from my 4-year-old sister who shared the bed with me that night. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, though, and sort of looking around. Everything was dark except for the dim light that came from the bathroom down the hallway. The shadows from the sewing machines hit the wall and looked like boxcars. I turned over to face the left side of the room, and that was when I saw her. At first I thought it was my mum, a silhouette of a woman who was standing in the doorway of the room. She was wearing a white dress. My mum didn't wear dresses, not even a nightgown. She had long fine hair and my mum had the typical fluffy 90s do cut at her shoulders. I quickly realized that this wasn't my mum and panic suddenly set in. She was all white, skin, hair, dress, everything. I remember that she also had a sort of subtle glow about her. She was leaning on the doorframe, watching us sleep. Her head was tilted to the side, resting on her right hand that was being supported by her elbow against the frame. I guess I could say that I wasn't scared, but she was terrifying, but sort of comforting at the same time. It was sort of like she was watching her own children sleeping, lovingly. I remember closing my eyes and praying that she wouldn't come near me, and she never did. The next morning, I went to the kitchen where my grandma was already awake, making us breakfast, waffles with several different syrups and a huge bowl of assorted fruit. I didn't talk or eat much for the majority of breakfast, and my dad definitely took notice. After a few minutes of coaxing, I finally told him what I saw, and he immediately looked at my grandma and said, "See, I told you." This is a recollection of a campout that I had a few summers ago, and the exact details have started to become fuzzy, but I'll try to relay it as best as I can. So, it's a Boy Scout camp, northern Wisconsin. I'm sure you can probably guess which one. It's got a smiling tent as a mascot. There's maybe a little over a dozen of us, some scout leaders too, all within a little clearing that makes up where one of the many troops are set up. 2 boys to each tent at this point. Me and my best friend from very, very early childhood are tent buddies, and on maybe the 3rd night at this camp is when this happens. So, I remember falling asleep pretty normally. It's dark, and I wasn't the last one to leave the campfire after dinner. Me and my friend both were in our sleeping bags on opposite sides of the tent. Our bags are at our side, and our hiking boots right by the door, carefully removed when we entered the tent. Eventually, I wake up to strange sounds, hard breathing, or maybe soft grunting or whatever. It's the dead of night, like 2 or 3 in the morning. Must have been around that time. I'm sort of frozen, and I look around at the walls of the tent, but nothing seems amiss. Just this heavy, low breathing sound. It was then that I see my buddy is awake as well, and we're both frozen and terrified. He starts to say something, but I put my finger to my lips and make the shushing gesture. Behind his head, where he was laying, something is brushing up against the tent, poking into the artificial fabric, almost sort of antler-like. I also could have sworn that I heard someone say, "Hello, is anyone there?" My friend then sees this and lets out a small gasp. Something pokes through the tent suddenly, sharp and black. A loud exhale, and then whatever it was just steps back. We hear branches crunch and twigs snap, fading into the distance. We stay awake for another hour, and in hushed whisper try to rationalize what the heck just happened, asking if we should check outside the tent. We both don't remember falling asleep again, but we wake up in the morning. The hole in the tent is there, along with 3 to 4 more similar ones on various sides of it. By the time the other boys in the camp were waking up, I had the courage to check around the tent to see if there's any footprints, broken twigs, or something to determine just what was outside of our tent. And behind our tent were bare human footprints. They circled around our tent several times, but never did they lead to or from the tent. Just 3 to 4 rings of footprints that looped around it. We asked around to see if anybody had actually pulled a prank on us, but everyone that was there swore that they hadn't. Whatever happened, me and my buddy talked about it a few times on that trip, but these days, we refuse to talk about it again. I've always wanted my own dog. I put a lot of research into it and decided to get a Burmese mountain dog, which my mum graciously paid for part of as a graduation present. One thing to know about this breed, and my dog in specific, is that they are very friendly and don't know a stranger. Before getting him, I saw videos of the same breed just napping while repair people came into the backyard. This was not an issue for me. I mean, we have a very protective St. Bernard at home, and I didn't think that we needed a second guard dog. And as I wanted to be able to take my dog out, it was better for him to be friendly anyway. So around October, when a chill was just starting to form in the air, a friend and I, we decided to get some pumpkin-flavored coffee for us and a pup cup for Sirius and go to a local park to get him some exercise, now that it wasn't too hot for him outside, and to smoke some as well. This is not one of the nicer parks. It used to have a dog park attached to it, but due to flood damage, continuous as well, it was closed down, and now the area where it used to be is mostly secluded. and there's plenty of people who use that to their advantage, and do drugs there as well. There's also lots of families on the weekends that go there as well, but this was the middle of the week during school and work hours, so the park was pretty empty when we got there. As we walked past a man who was training for something that I'm not sure that I'd like to know about, to be honest. He was carrying a full army pack and was drenched in sweat, and when I later told my stepdad about this, he said that he had seen the same guy running along the main road where there are no sidewalks. Sirius completely ignored him. We also met a couple who had a Rottweiler puppy a few months younger than my dog, and we stopped to let them play for a moment and talk to the couple. Sirius had absolutely no issues with the pair and was very happy to receive pets from them as well. Eventually, we got to the location we were planning to smoke at, directly underneath the train tracks, which is the most secluded location in the park. There's only one path to get to it, unlike the rest of the park that sort of loops around. This area used to be a road, but it was purchased by the city for the park, so it's empty besides a house or two just past the barriers. We were there for maybe around 30 minutes before an older man walks by, gives us a "how's it going?" the way people do when you pass them on a walk, and turns around and walks back the other way. A little while later, he passes back again and notices us still sitting there, stops and says, "Are you girls alright? Are you waiting on a ride?" This did creep me out a bit, but I tend to be overly cautious, so I say, "Oh no, we're okay," which was completely true. I mean, I had driven there and I was still nowhere sober enough to drive, and we were just enjoying the nice weather before it got too cold. He responds by telling us to have a nice day and turns around. Sirius, through these interactions, just continued to play with his stick that he was chewing on. I mention these encounters just to solidify how absolutely strange the next one was. So, soon after, a man who seemed to be in his late 40s or early 50s starts to walk toward us. Instead of turning around like the other man had done, he starts to walk toward us, and Sirius absolutely loses it, barking and growling at this man and attempting to lunge at him. Despite the fact that he was only around 7 months old at this time, Sirius was a big dog, probably around 70 pounds at this point, and the man was very freaked out and continues past us, walking faster and keeping his distance. However, like I said earlier, there's nothing behind us besides an empty road and thick heavy woods. My friend and I continued to sit there talking until I was sure enough that he was gone. That was weird, right? I asked my friend around 30 minutes later. She agreed with me. I mean, where did he even go anyway? That was something I hadn't considered at that time, but looking around I couldn't think of anywhere that he could have been. Because we're high and stupid though, we come up with the brilliant idea to wait and see if he passes us again. And if he doesn't, we'd walk towards the road behind us to see if there were houses that he could have gone to. However, him living in one seemed pretty unlikely. I mean, he was dressed for hiking clearly with one of those backpacks specifically made for it. And if he lived so close, I didn't think that he'd be dressed up for a hike or anything. He doesn't pass us again, so we walk up the small hill and past the barricade. There's around 3 houses just past it, all pretty run down, and the second that we got to the first one, a man comes out on this porch with a gun and just stares at us. So, safe to say that the people who live there aren't a fan of people from the park on their property. I don't know if that's connected, but I think the only solution is that he went into the woods. I've never seen my dog act like that before, and I haven't seen him act like that since then. Every other time he acts like everyone he meets is known for life. I've always thought that dogs have better instincts than us, and I think that this just proved it for me. We're both pretty small girls, around 100 pounds and under 5'5", and it's scary to think what could have happened had my dog not been with us. And, I mean, we had no way to defend ourselves in such a secluded area. Like I said, this place was like forest beyond us, so really there was no reason for this guy to go there. My hunch is that he actually passed us, realized that our dog wasn't going to let him get near us, and ended up just continuing walking so that he didn't look too suspicious. It's either that or he was involved in something in that house, which begs the question, what the heck is going on in that dilapidated house? This morning I woke up at my usual time, 5 a.m, to go to the gym before classes. I'm off campus staying with my parents, however, they're away for the month, so I've had the house to myself. And well, every morning I wake up, let my dog out to go and do his morning business, shower, brush my teeth, and let him back inside before I get dressed and leave. This morning I woke up feeling a little bit weird. The house sort of had a bit of a strange energy to it, I guess, and my gut sensed that something was up. I let our dog out into our pitch-black backyard. The deck light didn't turn on like it usually does, which was a bit unusual, but I didn't think too much of it and went to go and take a shower. After my shower, I went back to the sliding glass door to my dog to let him in, and I could see him sitting there waiting for me. I opened the door and watched him, a large black lab, walk in and go under a table. I then proceeded to close the door and walk to my room to get dressed. But here's where it gets weird. You see, as I'm leaving the area where the back door is, I felt that same strange feeling that I had been feeling all morning. I decided to look at the dog bed and noticed that he wasn't in it, so I looked back at the door and saw, to my utter confusion, that he was still sitting outside. My stomach instantly dropped. I mean, I could have sworn on my life that I watched him come in the house and go under a table. I walked back to the door, let my actual dog inside this time, and instantly searched my house to see if another animal came inside at some point, and I didn't find anything. As I thought more about it though, the thing that I let in before looked more like a shadow rather than a dog, I guess, and it sort of moved differently too, although it was around the same size. I called my girlfriend to tell her about it, as she was waiting for me at the gym, and she said that it was probably just my imagination, but I have never ever imagined something this real. I wasn't even tired too, and I definitely saw it. I noticed that my dog was acting a little strange too, staring at one of our walls and growling quietly as well. In any case, I left soon after and I got on with my day. I must admit though that I am a bit at a loss as to what to do. If anyone has a possible explanation to ease my nerves or knows what I should do next, then I would love to know, because I'm really dreading sleeping there alone tonight. A couple of days ago, I was walking my dog around the lake at my condominium like I always do. It was around 6:30 p.m. and the sky was getting a little bit dark. My dog is a golden retriever and she's very friendly with people and other dogs too. She's 6 months old and she rarely barks or growls at anybody. She actually loves being petted by strangers, in fact, but she's usually very calm too, regardless of if people pet her or not. Anyway, we were walking and suddenly I turned around and I saw this guy coming out of nowhere. The guy looked a little bit odd. He had glasses and he sort of seemed to be walking nervously. He was still far away from us, so I didn't think that he was nervous about my dog or anything. As he got closer to us though, I just sort of stopped and moved to the side like I usually do when there is somebody coming from behind us. I do this so that they can walk ahead of us, and my dog stops constantly looking back, moving its tail, looking forward to being pet. But instead, my dog just sort of starts getting, like restless, and also starts growling nervously while looking at this guy. I tried to calm her down and I smiled at the guy trying to be friendly, but the guy just sort of looked at me with a really serious face and started reaching for something out of his backpack. At this point, my dog just starts barking and I get this bad feeling and a shiver goes down my spine. For a second I thought, what if the guy had a weapon or something? The guy just kept walking, looking at me while reaching for something in his backpack. As my dog kept barking at him, I apologized for my dog's behavior and tried to tell him that my dog usually doesn't behave like that. But the guy just seemed to ignore me altogether. Finally, he just passes us and my dog starts barking again, but she's still really agitated. I just sat down next to her trying to calm her down while the guy just got lost between some of the houses at one point, instead of just walking the lake path, which seemed very weird to me. Now, maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe the guy just didn't like dogs, which is fine, I guess. I try to be really respectful to people who don't like dogs. But after he got lost from our sight, my dog just went back to her usual friendly self, and we were able to finish our walk. But I don't know, something felt really off about this guy, and the encounter altogether made me feel really uncomfortable. To preface this, I've dealt with sleep paralysis, night terrors, and shadow people since I was a child. I think it all started when maybe I was around 9 or 10, and it got worse as I entered my teenage years. Granted, I was dealing with a lot of abuse and childhood trauma at the time, so when they stopped after I moved out at 19, I just chalked it all up to stress. Flash forward to the present though, I've moved into this new apartment a couple of states over from my hometown almost 4 months ago now. Things have felt really good here too. I live with my roommate or best friend, 28-year-old female, and her 2 cats and her dog. But I felt the vibes were kind of off sometime last week, and I smudged the house and kept all the windows open to help air out the negative energy and bring in some more positive energy. Later that night, my roommate confessed to me that she'd been seeing shadow people in the hallway at night, and that the night before, one came up and actually touched her door handle. We keep her door propped open for the cats to run in and out, otherwise they scream. I assured her though that I felt something was off too, and I already cleansed the house. We had no problems the rest of the week, and she still hasn't seen any shadow people since then. However, Friday night, I went to bed as normal, had no problems falling asleep. My room stays pretty illuminated with a bright blue light that comes from the speakers on my PC. The light never shuts off on the speakers, even when my PC is off, so I can see everything really well in my room at night. And at some point, I woke up from a dream and I saw what I can only describe as a demonic woman. She sort of looked like the girl from The Ring, but in what looked like, I don't know, aeroplane stewardess clothes? The best way that I can think to describe it. She was in my open closet though, on my clothes like a rock climber, and she sort of tilted her head so far back that her face was upside down and facing me. She had a long tongue and she was moving her head all around and shaking it like crazy. I couldn't move. I tried to reach for my phone to call my roommate to wake her up or bang on the wall behind me, the opposite side of her room. So I was just stuck there laying there and watching this weird demon lady on my clothes in my closet. I was able to rationalize and tell myself that it's all a dream over and over again to try and wake myself up out of it. I finally woke up as I was trying to yell for help, but it kept coming out as a sort of whisper. I finally jumped out of bed in my empty room, and after looking around, she was gone. I was able to fall almost right back asleep after shaking off the whole experience, but I went ahead and cleansed my room again Saturday morning and spent some extra time on that closet as well. I mean, I've had sleep paralysis before, but this felt a bit different. I slept fine Saturday night, and last night the room felt good. Now, I haven't had any stress or have had anything happen that would trigger these again. It would suck if I moved several states away from home and straight into a haunted apartment. But if you have any thoughts and ideas on what I can do, that would be much appreciated. My girlfriend told me, like 2 weeks ago, that she was waiting in line at the convenience store with her friend in Chinatown, New York City, and this large, dapper-looking man came over to them. Apparently, he complimented her coat and commented how expensive it must be. She said thank you, and they chatted for a little longer. The man explained how his suit was just a Brooks Brothers suit, but she noticed that he had all sorts of expensive jewelry on. When my girlfriend and her friend explained that they were students, he kept making assumptions about how they must be rich and that their parents are paying for everything. My girlfriend was starting to feel uncomfortable and began trying to distance herself from him. He asked them if they had jobs and they told him no, as they were students. After this, he went on to tell them what he does for a living, without being asked, mind you, and he said, "I do all sorts of odd jobs, this and that. I mainly have these guys that work for me though. I find them off the streets and feed them and give them a place to stay. I'm waiting to meet up with them now." He referred to them as his minions, which made something that at first seemed wholesome very unsettling all of a sudden. He then told them that he had just had his wallet stolen and needed $400 for something. I don't remember the reason. He told them that he could pay them back later that week, but he needed the money right now. My girlfriend politely declined and at this point was really uncomfortable. She started walking towards the door to leave and said, "Nice to meet you and good luck." They both walked outside and sat on a bench outside of the convenience store. As they were sitting and discussing the strange interaction, they saw the man exit and stand outside about 10 feet away, waiting for a few minutes, looking at his phone. He then met up with 2 other men, and they chatted for a few minutes. The large man in the suit then walked the other direction, and the 2 other men then walked into the store and started holding it up with knives. Absolutely shocked and frozen, they both watched as the cashier put her hands up, then emptied out the cash register. The 2 men ran out of the store in the same direction as the man in the suit walked. We were both about to call the police, but saw that the cashier already was. They waited at the bench until the 2 police cars showed up, and then they walked in to tell the officers what they had just witnessed, and tried to help identify the robbers and the man that they had just met. I wonder though if this is a common thing in terms of organized crime, because to me it looked like this guy had paid homeless people to rob and commit this crime. So this happened to me quite recently. For practical and economic reasons, I used the taxi service, the fixed price, which cost me less than taking my vehicle, especially given the place where I live, as it's an ultra-rural village isolated from all cities, and where necessarily to go to the bank or go shopping, you have to hit like 10 to 20 kilometers. In general, the taxi service I use is ultra-professional, recent vehicles, clean, maintained, friendly driver, always a friendly random conversation, always on time, and almost always the same drivers too. But one day, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was entitled to a new driver, which was nothing special I suppose. It seemed like the same impeccable service, nothing to complain about really. But 2 weeks ago, this gentleman who already told me to call him by his first name gave me his age, his nationality, information that came out of nowhere, and continued his conversations by explaining that he bought a connected printer but can't get it to be recognized by his smartphone. So I try to give him some advice and it sort of stops there. Again though, this driver has a really enthusiastic mood, a little bit too much for my taste, so I don't pay attention to it. He keeps talking to me about his printer again and blurts out to me, "You who work in this field, you can help me. I can't. It's not connected. If you want, we can add ourselves on Messenger and you can help me." Since we had arrived at my destination, I stammered out an answer, something like, "I'll think about it later." But I knew that I needed to not talk to this guy about my work because I'm actually a computer technician, among some other things, so it would be obvious that he could get my number for this. In the end though, I ended up forgetting about this moment, since I had to help a friend. I was mired in a complicated divorce situation where there was domestic violence and stuff. Suffice it to say that this divorce worried me a lot, and that this moment with the taxi, I just ended up forgetting about it because of all this. Except that I had to move, and I necessarily called the taxi again. And after barely getting in, a sudden urge to get out of the vehicle came over me all of a sudden. He says hello to me, but using my first name, asks me for news about my father's health and some more playful humor, I guess. I specify that once again I never mentioned my first name, nor mentioned my father to this driver. Suffice it to say, though, that after this, we sort of drove in silence. In any case, I do what I have to do, and in the store parking lot, I call the taxi center to order a taxi for the return. The gentleman replies that there is already a vehicle that has dropped off an old lady, that I have to meet her and notify her instantly that she can pick me up. I arrived at the level of the driver, and again, it was this same driver, with a big smile. He helps me by putting my bags in the trunk, and at this point, he sort of gives me a tactile gesture on my back. A kind of, I don't know, it felt like a bit of caressing almost. Whatever it was, though, it made my blood run cold. The driver, though, asks me to get in the front because the rear doors have a problem unlocking or something. And it was at this point that I honestly almost backed out of this. I get in the front, though, telling myself 10 kilometers by car, it will go quickly, and I tried to hide my emotions. But that was a mistake. This ultra-curious guy was talking to me, asking me a ton of questions, and it almost seemed like he was trying to, direct my answers. The questions were very focused on explicit content, though, increasingly scandalous, not to say that things got very direct after a while, too. He would insist upon things like, when I finish, you must compliment me. Have you ever tried the Moroccan cigar? And always with a really awkward smile, touching the limits of my crotch, tactile movements in my direction while I was sticking to the door. He was trying to hold my wrist, though, as I was attempting to fix my hand over the central locking button. The doors, which had no problems in the end, since the onboard computer didn't indicate any warnings. They were accessible, and I genuinely thought about just jumping out at one point. And of course, instead of taking the shortest route, he took the longest, which reduces the time of the route from 10 to 15 minutes to almost 50 minutes. It was also in an ultra-isolated wooded area, which obviously didn't help. In the end, I just tried to maintain my composure. I responded vaguely to his comments or tried to make little jokes, hiding my growing anxiety. I don't know, and I don't really want to know what this guy was up to, but I arrived at my place. I took all of my bags in one foul swoop, and I just got the heck out of there. At home, in the hour that followed, the driver spoke to me on WhatsApp too. I blocked him directly after that, and I didn't read any more. But after calming down, I contacted the taxi company, or I explained the situation, and the guy on the phone just answered me with, "Are you talking about so-and-so?" I answered in the affirmative. And then he answered me in a really weird way, almost in a very, mafia intonation. I have no other images in mind to describe it, but it was like, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." So on the one hand, I said to myself, I may not have been the first person that this guy tried it on, which is scary, and also that this will take care of it. I don't know. After this, I think I'm going to use another taxi service. This whole situation is still spinning in my head, and to be honest, I'm still processing it all, and I don't know what to think. This was in 2011, a year after I'd, a female, 22 at the time, had graduated college. I was living in my first apartment with a friend. I had adopted the sweetest dog that I'd ever had, a runt of the litter, Pomeranian, who literally loved every person that she ever met. My nephew, who was young at the time, would sometimes handle her a little bit roughly. Sweet kid, and we'd correct him, but he didn't quite realize how little she was under all that fur, and she tolerated it without ever nipping or anything. One day, though, my roommate was gone and there was a knock at the door. It was a handyman who said that he was there for an annual check on appliances. He was wearing the apartment complex's standard uniform and had a badge, so I didn't really think twice about it. Even though I hadn't been notified that this would be happening, I just went ahead with it anyway. He comes in and begins chatting and sort of, like leering. I felt a bit uncomfortable, but not really as freaked out as when my dog came rushing in between us, ears back, teeth bared, and started growling at him. He kind of awkwardly laughed and went to pet her, a weird choice for a dog that is baring its teeth at you, and she immediately lunged forward like she was going to bite this guy. He leaped back before she could bite him. Tiny dog, large man, but he was obviously freaked out by her. At this point, she is straight up barking at this guy. He asked if I could put her away while he worked, and I lied and said that she had separation anxiety, so I recommended that he come back another time when I could walk her, or when my roommate was there so one of us could be in the room with her. And so he left, but strangely, he never did come back. My dog lived another 7 years, and not once did she ever growl at any other human, let alone try to bite one. You hear about dogs being able to read people, so while I didn't know if he would have done anything to me while on company hours, I still think that she could sense that he wasn't a good person. In any case, I'm glad that she was there that day, and it is strange that he never did come back. We, a 32-year-old female, 32-year-old male, 10-year-old female, and 10-year-old male, bought our new house this past July from a retired minister and his wife. As soon as we started moving in, we noticed a weird bumping and thumping coming from the master bedroom closet shortly after sunset every evening. At this time, we were all sleeping on a mattress in the living room waiting for our furniture to be moved. We just sold our respective houses and were combining households. We had a plumber come and check things out to make sure that it wasn't just pipes thumping, and it wasn't. We moved our furniture in over the next few weeks, and life continues as normal. We still heard the thumps from upstairs, sounded like an animal jumping down off of something up high, and noticed some other odd things happening as well. Like the light in our entryway in our garage would randomly be turned on some days when we got home, and so we decided to install cameras in the front of the entries to see if maybe someone had our access code or something, coded entry, no key, to the front door, and was stopping by for whatever reason. We also had a friend who was an electrician checking out our wiring to make sure that everything looked okay, no electrical issues at all, and also no visitors in the end. Now one night, my partner was away at work on night shift and I was sitting on the couch watching TV while my son slept upstairs. Stepdaughter was at her mum's for the evening and I kept seeing little flashes coming from in front of the oven. I thought that maybe there was a car passing by on the main road, so I checked the doorbell camera and nothing had driven by. Then I decided that maybe the oven light was flickering on or something, so I watched the oven for a minute to see if it would come on. And instead, I saw what looked almost like blue linen move from one side of the doorway to the other. And then the noises started. First, I heard the thumping coming from upstairs in the master bedroom, then the dining room, the kitchen, the entryway, and back up the stairs. I texted my partner and said something is going on in this house and either I'm losing my mind or some weird spirit stuff is going on, but I feel like I'm under attack, and asked him to come home immediately. In the meantime, I went upstairs to my bedroom with both my cats and waited. The house started to hum in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was almost like static electricity had filled the air or something. That was when I heard a snap, and for a split second, I saw my grandmother, who had passed a few years back, standing at the foot of my bed, wearing a blue linen top and pants. This detail is important too, but I didn't know it at the time. And I was terrified, so I called out enough and it was gone. The air calmed down, the anxiety left, the house was quiet. I immediately messaged my cousin and said, "Dude, I think I just saw Nanny in the house and I need you to tell me that I'm not nuts," and described what I'd seen, to which she sent me a photo of her and said, "This outfit?" and told me that it was the outfit that my grandmother had been buried in apparently. I didn't attend the visitation prior to the funeral because I lived hours away at the time and I had just moved back to my hometown in July, so I didn't know this. My partner came home at around 11:30 p.m. and laughed at me because I'd sweat my entire body outline into our sheets. I told him what happened and we changed the sheets and sat up for a while being reasonably freaked out, and then we just went to bed. The next morning, I thought that I'd gone bonkers, so I messaged a medium my friend recommended, and we met a couple of weeks later, and she told me that she felt my grandmother was coming around to try and warn me about something and to stay alert. That was in December, and 2 months later, the next time that my son and I were the only ones alone in the house, we were woken up shortly after midnight to the neighbor kicking our front door in and screaming for us to get out because our house was burning down with us inside of it. We got out and everything was okay in the end, but the fire marshals inspected after the fire was out and told us that there was apparently an issue with the chimney and evidence that every time that we'd started a fire in our wood stove, when it started getting cold around November, there was more than likely a small fire smoldering in our walls, drying out the wood, until eventually it dried out enough to catch fire inside the wall and just burn all the way through. No one will ever convince me that she wasn't there trying to warn us that night. Everyone survived, the house burned to the ground, and it was honestly the most terrifying set of experiences that I've ever had. Every time that I think about this story, my brain just breaks. It was 2014. My girlfriend at the time and I went on an impromptu camping trip up in Northern California. I'm not quite exactly sure where, but we lived in Sacramento and drove about 4 or 5 hours up I-5. We were up in the hills and drove down some pretty sketchy roads. Once we found a spot, we parked our car and hiked maybe half a mile in, truly in the middle of nowhere. We set up our tent and made a small fire pit about 25 yards away, I would guess. The day was fine too. We hung out and did camping things, and when it was time for us to go to bed, we put out the fire, got in the tent, zipped it up, and we went to sleep. But this is where it gets really weird. You see, the girl woke me up at about maybe midnight to tell me that she was going to find a place to pee, but she was struggling to get out of the tent. "I can't find the zipper," she says. It's just gone." So I get up to help her, and as I feel around the walls, they're completely smooth. I grabbed the flashlight and then I turned it on to investigate, and it was then that we found out that the zipper was actually under us. All of our stuff was still in order as we left it, but we were now sleeping on the door of the tent. We rolled the tent to finally get out, and when we finally do, we find that we are right next to the fire pit that we built 25 yards out. We were so terrified and confused because there was just no way that we could have slept through both of us rolling a tent that far with all of our stuff staying in its place like that. We stayed up until the sun came back up, and after that we left right away. I still have zero explanation as to what happened that night. I entertained some pretty out there thoughts, but this one is one that will sit with me forever as the strangest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. Almost a year ago, I was an opener at a resort, clocking in before 5 a.m. each day. The resort is located inside of an affluent neighborhood in a very wealthy town or suburb. Employees had to park in one of 2 parking lots at either ends of the property, and the lot that I chose was adjacent to a long and windy road outside the resort, which led to the rest of the neighborhood. The road and the resort were separated by a short range of brush and trees that no one ever walked through. So I'd arrived one morning, per usual, and put the car into park and my headlights still on. The lights in the lot weren't ever on in the morning since nobody else really showed up before 6 a.m. when the sun was out, so it was usually always dark at the start of my walk. Save for the security as well, I was one of the first employees to arrive on the property each morning, and was usually completely alone in this particular parking lot at this time. This morning didn't seem any different either. I had my hand literally at my keys, my brain in the process to turn off my car, when all of a sudden I noticed a young girl, maybe like 14 or 15 years old, come sort of scampering. Her body language was the exact definition, run with quick light steps, especially through sort of fear or excitement, through the span of the trees that separate the resort from the outside road. She was directly in front of the car, and my headlights illuminated a clear view of her in the pitch black. She looked like she was maybe in high school, had long blonde hair and was wearing a jacket with pajamas maybe, like she just walked out of a house perhaps. One thing about her that bothered me though was that she wouldn't stop laughing and smiling. I couldn't hear her laughing from outside the car obviously, but she was visually giggling or something and I wasn't aware of or could see what she was laughing at, and it was really unnatural. She occasionally glanced behind her too, as if somebody else was waiting there away from the headlights maybe. She then waved at me like it was a normal gesture at this time, and then immediately ran to my passenger side door. This all happened in a matter of seconds, and I wasn't really sure what was even happening besides my anxiety spiking at first. I know that I simultaneously sort of yanked the auxiliary cord from my phone to shut whatever song had been playing off, while grabbing for the lock button. I remember feeling panic for never remembering if it's up or down to lock when the girl began pulling violently and incessantly on the door handle on the passenger side. I realized then too that because I didn't turn my car off, it had stayed locked. She began pounding on the window though, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs for her to leave before pressing on my horn. I could see her laughing outside like this was some type of game, as if I were a silly friend not letting her in as a joke. After a few seconds, she stopped the pounding and trying to open my car door. Her face fell flat like I had disappointed her, and she started to walk away from my car back the way that she came. She waved at me again before squeezing through the trees, out of view of my headlights. The whole encounter confused me almost as much as it scared me. Most people that I've told the story to just chalked it up to her being on drugs, but that narrative hasn't felt right to me despite her behavior. Maybe she was just being an extremely out-of-touch teenager whose parents need a firmer grip on her. My first thought was possibly human trafficking, but I'm not sure if that would fit this scenario, as I'm not the most well-versed with the subject. I told someone when I made it to LP, but they didn't seem to care much. I didn't call the police, and I regret that. I'll never get it out of my brain, though, how off the feeling was watching a stranger, seemingly alone, pop out from the trees in the darkness, laughing, and then try to violently enter your car in an empty parking lot. I do think the possibility of somebody else being present the whole time is a lot more scary, and I wonder who else was there, and also where exactly. For some backstory, I moved in with my ex-boyfriend at his parents' house when we were 17. I'd known him since kindergarten and was aware of his night terrors for at least 5 years. I believe they may have gone on for as long as they lived in that house, though I'm not sure how old he was when they moved in. I didn't know much about night terrors and didn't know anyone else who had them. He also didn't want to talk a lot about it, so I never pressed. When I noticed him having one, I just saw how he would breathe heavily a few seconds to minutes and wake in a bad mood. I would best describe the mood as sort of withdrawn and irritable, I guess, and would take a few minutes to level out in order to be approachable again. The night terrors caused him to have severe insomnia, and he would only ever sleep very few hours over the course of days. I had been living there for a few months and never had any feelings of unease, which is very odd since I'm usually sensitive to energy shifts from previous experiences. Some days, I would wake up and go into the kitchen to see open cabinets or drawers. I didn't think too much of this and figured that somebody must have left them open after a midnight snack. Until one morning, I jokingly mentioned how someone keeps forgetting to close the cabinets to his mum, and she replies with, "Yeah, that's just the shadow people," as if it was something that she just casually forgot to mention. They do that all the time, followed by telling me that she and her husband both have seen them in different areas of the house on multiple occasions. But since I hadn't experienced anything there myself, I just sort of laughed it off, I guess. At this time, our bed was against the inside wall of the house beside the door from the hallway. My ex liked to play a joke on me when I would leave the room, where he would reach over to hold the door handle so it wouldn't turn when I would try to get in. Harmless fun, no big deal, and we both thought that it was funny. One bright weekend, though, I thought that it would be good to do some spring cleaning and rearrange the bedroom furniture. I opened the windows to let in some cool breeze, cleaned the carpet, pushed the bed back against the outside wall next to a window, and pulled the TV stand to the foot of the bed. After my ex came home, we ate and took turns having showers. When I went to open the door to the bedroom, the handle didn't turn. I chuckled since I was used to him playing that game. Only this time, when I went to turn the handle again, it still didn't budge. I thought that he was probably wanting to play a little more than usual, so I tried twisting the handle back and forth multiple times, but it stayed stationary. And when the latch finally released, I pushed the door open with such force that I stumbled into the room, only to see my ex playing Xbox with his headset on, sitting 15 feet away from the door, and wondering why it looked like I just fell in. And that was the first time that I felt like something could be in this house. It was fall, too, when the knocks first started. We'd been having some strong winds accompanied with cold rain at that time. There was only one other house that shared the dead-end road to the top of the hill where we lived. It was late in the evening. The rain knocked the satellite out, so we got out some DVDs and we put on a movie. At some point, though, we both heard scratches on the walls from the shrubs and the tree leaves hitting the siding and the windows. And then, 3 very faint knocks came from the wall to the right of the bed. This was an exterior wall at the front of the house, so we decided that it was from the wind. Some minutes passed when we heard 3 more knocks come from the wall next to the closet, an interior wall with a large shared dresser along it. We decided at this point to recreate the sound by knocking on the wall behind us, just to confirm the noise that we heard. And less than a minute later, 3 clear knocks came from the wall directly behind us. We knocked 3 times back, then the knocks started coming from what seemed like all of the walls at once. They were much faster and louder this time, and seemed to have no pattern as to where they were coming from, and just as fast as they came, it all stopped at once. We told his parents, who came into the room, and they knocked 3 times on the wall, and they got the same response echoed back. So, back to night terrors now. Since I'd figured out when he was having an episode, I began waking up to his heavy breathing and slight twitching. I would calmly try to soothe him with a quiet voice, tell him that it's okay and that I was there. He told me that it helped, so I decided to pry a little bit. I asked him what it was like, and he only told me that the things that he used to see were always different when he was younger, but more recently, there was one that was reoccurring regularly. He wouldn't describe what it looked like, just that it got closer to him every night, and he was afraid of what would happen if it ever got close enough to touch him. He woke up once and told me that it laid down next to him, and he was completely distraught because it was the closest that it ever was. But he said that it couldn't touch him when I'm around because it's afraid of you. I don't know what he meant by that, but I told him that it should be. And it was around this time when I began to notice movement. It all started with dresser drawers being open in the mornings or after we left the room. I thought maybe the drawer slides were just wearing out from use or something, and were just popping back open. But it was almost always a different drawer. If I noticed 3 drawers open in the morning, I would just close them and go on about my day. Yet, different ones than before would be open when I came back. Sometimes they were slightly cracked and others were pulled all the way to the end. A few times we caught them opening after we closed them, and tried every way that we could think of for the possibility that they weren't being closed correctly in the first place, causing them to roll back open. And one time when my ex was napping, the drawer started to open, and I noticed his heavy breathing and panicked REM state, so I tried to soothe him with my voice, which seemed to calm him down, but then I noticed an empty pop can by the TV stand started to rock side to side. It started slow at first, then began to move so fast that it seemed like it was almost vibrating. As it got worse, so was his breathing, so I looked at it and shouted in my mind for it to stop, and as soon as I thought it, the can stopped moving, and he was also back to a peaceful sleep. I used to be a regular lucid dreamer, but have never had sleep paralysis or any sort of experience like this one. That same night as the wobbly can, I was sleeping, curled up on my side and facing down toward the bedroom door, when I saw something. It stood in the doorway, taller than the frame, with a shadow or misty-looking sort of body, and a face wider than anything that I'd seen before. No discernible features, just as if the whiteness was light being pulled into it or through it or something. Almost looking like a tunnel, I guess. It seemed like I could feel it better than I could see it as well. And whatever it was, it felt like pure rage. It felt like anger and sadness, stronger than anything that I'd ever felt in my life. And before I could make sense of what was happening, I felt myself stand directly up out of my body, point at this creature, and yell at the top of my lungs, "I command you in the name of Jesus to leave this house." I looked down and saw my ex sleeping beside me, and as quickly as I stood up, I fell straight back into my body and into the most peaceful sleep that perhaps I'd ever had. When I woke up, my ex was sitting and watching TV. I looked at him and asked what that thing looked like from his sleep paralysis, and he told me that he didn't want to talk about it, but it would be easier to draw it. He got a notebook and soon drew exactly what I had saw, to the point that I immediately got chills and started crying when he showed it to me. He asked me if I'd seen it, and I told him what happened. And weirdly, neither of us had seen it since, until he came home from the military.